All right, thank you. On that note, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's board retreat for the County of San Benito for March 11th at 10 a.m. at San Juan Oaks. Call to order at 10 a.m. exactly. Could we have a Pledge of Allegiance? Supervisor Patello, will you lead us out, please?
Okay. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we have acknowledge of certificate of posting?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against, motion carries. Thank you. Next one, we'll do regular agenda. For each agenda item, the following schedule shall occur. First, we have our county council, Ray. I'm sorry, CEO. Sorry, Barbara.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go ahead and open up the session by providing an introduction to this year's board retreat. Historically, the county has used the board retreat as a roadmap to our current year's goals, activities that we would like to look at for the year. This year in 2020, we will be mainly discussing, and for some of you, if you can look at it, there's a pamphlet here that you have, strategic plan, mainly discussing item 1 and 2 of that plan, which is the operational development and excellence, as well as the planning for sustainable growth. Those are the first two that we have outlined, and mainly going to be discussing those two in today's overview of our board retreat today. With that, when you look at this one page, actually it's 2 pages back and front, you'll notice a year in review from last year. We actually met and had a full day of strategic plan discussion, actually it was a little bit more, as well as a policy and procedure discussion, along with a governance discussion, such as the Brown Act and other things that relate to governance. And with that, you'll notice on the left-hand side there, the items. You'll notice the strategic plan and the guide to policy and operations, along with hiring process, purchasing, travel, and CalCard policies, and a CalCard program to actually streamline operations. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the actual effective dates and actual implementation of those particular items. And when you turn the page, you'll notice their accomplishments with an overview. And I think the biggest accomplishments that your board looked at this last year was to really address our roads in our community. And with the passing of Measure G, your board took the direction to move forward with an expedient plan to address that, as well as repairing potholes. In addition to that, we looked at energy efficient programs with the 80% in reduced energy cost, as well as over $10 million, it's $11.5 million net savings over the life of the project on savings. So those are just a couple of key elements, as well as the continuing work on the Homeless Service Center. You'll notice that there's been multiple phases with that, and this last year we actually started moving forward with the phase 3 with your board. So there's been an ongoing movement and direction directly associated with last year's direction from the board retreat, and in particular looking at the strategic plan. With that, I'd like to go ahead and share with you the actual agenda. It's actually posted on the PowerPoint there. We'll have approximately a 2-hour Real Colors training facilitated by Hannah Stone-Cipher. She's our Staff Services Manager at Health and Human Services, as well as behavioral health, Alan Yamamoto and his team will be sharing some training to the public as well as your board in regards to state funding and how that works. And really these two elements are, when you look at that one page, are directly related to last year's strategic plan. This is kind of really a phase 2 approach to the strategic plan that we had last year, and we're kind of looking at implementing some of these elements. And the first thing that your board had looked at and wished for in the strategic plan is operational development and excellence. With that is training. And I think being able to work collaboratively, and that's what these two elements here are for us today. The latter part of today's retreat is really going to be emphasizing item number 2, the planning for sustainable growth. We have some good speakers coming this afternoon. We have Dave Smith, co-founder from Cal Oz, as well as Peter Ansel, senior advisor from Senator Ana Caballero's office, as well as Harry Mavrogenis. He will be actually opening up the Opportunity Zone discussion for us. And we've also invited our Economic Development Corporation to give us a brief update and also tying us or leveraging the Opportunity Zones out of their house. So that's what we're going to be hearing this afternoon. So with that, we look forward to the presentations. I think there are going to be some really healthy discussions. And with regards to timing, there might be, it's not actually posted there, so I'll go ahead and highlight that. We have a break that was originally outlined for 30 minutes. What we're going to do is we're going to shorten that to a 10-minute break after the Real Colors training. It'll be buffet style, so we'll request your board to take a 10-minute recess to go ahead and retrieve our food, come back to our tables, and then behavioral health will move forward with actually their presentation while we eat, so keep the program moving forward. As well as Harry and the other opportunity down. So we're hoping to finish this afternoon, 3 or 4. I just I've asked the speakers to keep the program moving forward, and that's it. So that's it, Mr. Chair. With that being said, we'd like to go ahead and move forward to the second item from our Health and Human Services Agency, Hannah. And there we have, just as regards to the individuals that would be speaking, we have biographies for them. I mean, they're pages and pages. I don't think I'm going to sit here and read each one of them. We will post everything on our website so everyone can actually look at that and read those. But Hannah does come from our Health and Human Services Agency, and she comes with a wealth of information, a wealth of experience, as well as one of the things I thought was interesting is she actually worked at the County of Ventura. So I want to go ahead and welcome her up and invite her up. So.
Okay, before we do that, is there any questions from the board? None? Okay, Anna, you want to welcome?
Good morning. My name is Hannah Stonecipher, and I'm the Staff Services Manager at Health and Human Services Agency. So this morning, I'm going to be your facilitator for a Real Colors training, which is part of the strategic plan for development. This is to help develop not only our communication styles within ourselves, recognizing strengths, but also be better to able to communicate with each other, recognize the strengths in each other, so that way we can work collaboratively to move forward, not with only in our plans, but building those important community relationships. So that being said, I just want to do a quick introduction. I know a lot of people already know each other, but so we can go around the room. There's also name tents on your table with dry erase boards, or dry erase markers. So if you want to write your name on there, so that way if there's unfamiliar faces, you can kind of easily say good morning. So let's do a quick introduction. So if you can just state your name, what your job title is, and let's do something fun. What's the strangest food you've ever eaten? And I'll start with our board.
My name is Jim Gilio. I'm not very adventurous when it comes to food, so I don't really have a great answer for that. I'd probably say like frog legs at the garden festival, I would guess.
My name is Mark Medina, and hope I don't get in trouble, but the most weirdest food would be, when I lived in the Philippines, would be monkey.
Cool.
Well, my name is Jaime de la Cruz. Is my strangest food, believe it or not, today will be crazy. We used to eat raw ground beef with cucumber and lemon and pickle.
Yeah, what?
Raw ground beef with cucumber, pickles, and lemon.
As far as your weird food?
Well, it's pretty dangerous back then.
You cure it with lemon.
I'm Anthony Botello, and I like turtle.
My name's Peter Hernandez, and off the top of my head, the first thing that came to mind was in Mexico it's called chumiles. It's basically crickets. But I was a kid, and I look back and regret it for sure.
Barbara Thompson, and I would say Rocky Mountain oysters.
Ray Espinoza, CEO for the county. I don't think it's weird for me, but for my wife, menudo is, so I like menudo. So.
Let's share a couple. Were there any that you thought were really fun that, I see
Can I
those
get
say.
a card?
Don't worry about it.
Spend the night with Demi Moore. And who did it belong to? Oh, okay.
It doesn't have to be the Demi Moore, it could be another Demi Moore, right?
The Demi Moore. What about another one? Melinda was born in Iceland. Let's do one last.
She was born in Iceland.
This person was offered 2 positions in different county departments on the same day, and the one she chose is the word, and that is
So, when we're looking at this, how did you guys find the person who belonged to the card? What did you do? Look for what? Look for a pencil. So you
That's something Jim would do.
So, mine was a man writing, and it said, I don't like cold weather. So I looked for a man who was well enough and driving for.
And was it who you thought it was?
No, I just eventually gave up and had to ask everybody. And then the guy who I found out, well, let's see how they work.
I didn't go to the academy, so I didn't do any of that. I just jumped up and asked who fly fishes. Direct and to the point.
There's a few things when we're doing this. So, what I'm hearing is some of you had assumptions that you thought this was going to be a certain type of person, and it turned out that it wasn't an accurate assumption. And so, this is kind of part of this is that we tend to have these assumptions when we're talking to other people, communicating with other people, and it's not really until we start kind of digging around or like getting to know them better that The last main one is going to be the wait and see. So you're kind of just hanging back, you're trying to observe, gather more information before you actually start communicating. So you see people kind of hanging on the side as they So we're going to just talk about a brief history of real colors. So it is a personality theory, built-in personality theory. We're going to see this real briefly. So just bear with me. So we're going to start with Socrates, back in 400 BC, who stated there was 4 main character types. Still one Bible, we're not going to go through all of that. Built off of that is Carl Jung in the 1920s, who said there was 4 psychological types. Thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition. And then, so what he did is he worked off of the idea we talked about 4 types of Socrates, and he was with psychiatrist, and he did spend a little time before developing his own theory of personality, and so he identified those 4 basic psychological functions. So from there, at the onset of World War II, we go into Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs. And what they did is they worked off of Carl Jung's work and developed the Myers-Briggs test. How many people have heard of Myers-Briggs? How many people have taken it? How many people remember what your 4 letters were? What were your 4 letters?
4, I was driver amiable. I was the driver amiable.
Anybody else? Yeah. So that's what we find typically with the Myers-Briggs is that you take this personality test, but you don't tend to remember what your 4 letters are, let alone what each one is. So building off of that, shortly thereafter, we have David Percy in the 1970s. And he was known as the father of temperament. And the author of the book, Please Understand Me, which describes his theory using guardian, rationale, idealist, and artisan to describe the different temperaments. So then real colors have been built off of all of this, and it's broken down into 4 temperaments as well. So we use 4 colors, gold, blue, green, and orange, to be able to easily identify your temperament, apply them to real life, and we find that you remember it. Like you remember, oh, I'm in green, oh, I'm in orange. I want you guys to remember when we're doing this, though, for all 4 colors, you can operate most easily in your dominant 2 colors. Okay? So, from there, we're going to pass out colors that's in the book. And, okay, now you're going to help me. So we're going to put the book down in front of you. Please don't open them, touch them, until we start the turn.
I need 4.
Thank you. Don't open it.
Oh, I know.
Don't open it, okay? Don't open it.
Oh, don't. Oh, I just, I'm curious.
I did too.
What's going on?
I know it's hard. This dad. I keep asking, what is it?
They should hang like banners down on the rafters here.
So now that everybody has your instrument, what we're going to do is you're going to open it up, and you're going to see these 4 cards. And you're going to carefully take out the 4 cards, and you're going to take them apart and separate them in minutes. Not reading them, not really looking at them right now. Just take them out of your book, separate them out.
I guess they're supposed to. Turn out the ribbon.
You're supposed to put them in order?
Yeah, from the most would be the best, first to the least.
So when you have them in order that looks most like you to least like you, in your instrument book, so this book is for you to see. You can look through it later, there's some information about the different colors, temperaments, things like that, but you feel free to write in this. So there's going to be a real color scoring sheet on here. And what you're going to do, in the top line of the card picture, the color that looks most likely to you, you're going to write a 4. The next that looks most like you, you're going to write a 3, a 2, and then a 1 for the one that looks the least like you.
Can you say that again?
For the one that looks most like you. The one that looks most like you.
Oh,
One is the least, 4 is your
Most. Yes.
I'm on this page.
So if the gold is most like you, what you're going to do is put a 4.
Oh, just,
Yeah, and then your next one would be the
3.
3, 4, and...
okay, I got you.
so
Put them in order of this.
Yeah, yeah.
this is 1.
So we're focused on the pictures, right? So
On what?
the pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at the pictures. So if this is the one that looks most like you,
Oh.
you're going to put a 4.
Oh, okay. All right, if that's most like me, that's not.
So you have to look at all the pictures and see what looks most like you. And then you'll write a 4 for the one that looks most like you, 3 for the one that looks next most like you, 2, and then a 1 for the one that looks the least like you.
No, no.
Hey, Edgar.
No, you put it, this number 1 right here.
I might have messed up.
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
the,
then this,
so my
then
top
you
one?
put 4.
It's 4 or 1?
You put 4, gold, you put 4.
That's what I did.
If this is number 1. Okay, and then which is second most for you? Okay, and then you put 3 on green. And then the third best? Or, okay, yeah, you put down 2, that'll be 2.
On the first line?
We were just on the
The
first
least
line,
will
right?
be blue, yeah, 2 will be 1. There you go.
Move the cheese or no? Yeah, that's what you write down what you have to do, you put a 1, 2, Stephen Covey.
What you're going to now
Oh,
do is
here.
you're going to turn them
Yeah, I
over,
know.
and you're going to
I still don't know.
text on the back one. And you're going to read through each one. And the one that sounds most like you after you read them, you're going to put on top.
Okay.
And the next one that sounds next most like you after that. And go on to the one that sounds least like you.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
romantic. Poetic. Compassion, caring, simple. I think that together.
Okay, just, I haven't put anything here about.
You said professional.
He just told me to remove my card, so you got me in wrong order, so I can move them around. This is my personality, not your personality. We know what yours is now.
Just do what I tell you to do, right?
Just do what I tell you to do. You just do it for it.
Oh, yeah.
So, Mark. I turned mine on.
No, this one's not. I can hear you speaking. Careful. Okay.
On what now? What's going on? Text. We did the text already, right? Now the color? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said you were doing another one. I'm not overachieving.
Just did it backwards.
I can't decide.
Huh?
Yeah, this is hard.
Everybody done scoring those 2 questions? Okay. So next what we're going to do is you're going to turn the page, and in your booklet there's a color survey. There are 10 statements, and there's 4 responses to each statement. You're going to read through each statement and each response, and you're going to give a score for each one. So on the first one, so we're going to find 4 to the one that is most like you. When you read this statement, which response is most like you, then you're going to give a 3 to the next one that is most like you, and a 2 to the one that's next most like you, and then a 1 that is the least like you. So you're going to do that for each statement.
Lowest. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the least like you, the most like you before.
Oh, should have did it backwards then.
It's important to remember, don't shoot yourself box, and you're going to type the A number, your total for the A in the A box. Total for the B in the B box. Keep in mind that this does not already have ECD on the boarding card. If there's ECDA, so just make sure when you're adding up your numbers that you're typing it in the correct box.
Like, if you, like, it's like, say C right there, you add that, it's 4, 3.
Yeah, I think we're adding up the numbers now and putting them down here. Like the total numbers in each category so they can figure out which categories you rank the highest and the lowest. But they're C, D, D, A. So I just did the totals and I put the totals in each one. No, because like on like this one, you add up like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you know, and then you put down the total number here, I think.
All these
Color survey page. What you're going to do is you're actually going to flip back to the page before that, and there's the scoring line for color survey. And you're going to put your total for C in there, total for D, E, and A.
Oh, that's what my number goes. Okay.
Green. By green.
You're going to add your total down to all. So you're going to add all those blues together for that total at the bottom. Total numbers together for the total at the bottom.
2, 6.
Green,
Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
So now you're going to put these over here on this
There's
list,
one number that stands out.
and then you're going to add them all up.
Yours doesn't.
So you're going to add down. So you're going to transfer those numbers over here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's about right.
The money guy. You got your own cheapskate.
Yeah, that's me. Gold.
No.
Believe it or not, orange tied with first.
So from a lot of the chatter, it sounds like people are realizing what their dominant colors are, and maybe your
Yeah.
least dominant
I came up
colors.
with 3.
Okay, so
And then like, these are almost tied.
keep in mind that total last row should add up to 100.
100.
So just make sure that critical mass deviation. Okay, so by,
Mine's
Yeah,
more than
we
100.
got this.
show of hands, who had the total, like the highest number of their four in the blue category?
In the blue? You're blue?
Blue.
This, right here, family reunion.
Green. Orange. Big brown. So I will tell you, oranges tend to be less common in government work, and we'll get into that later on why. So I'm really happy that I actually have a good group of oranges to work with today. So of the blues, who scored 40 or higher in that category? 42 or higher? 44 or higher?
The blue?
Okay, so you are going to be our reality check for the blues. Okay? Reality check.
Nice.
Gold. Who scored a 40 or higher on gold? 42 or higher?
How much?
42 or higher?
Oh, yeah.
44? 46?
Yeah.
Okay, so Alicia will be our reality check for gold. Green, 40 or higher? 42 or higher? 44 or higher? 46? 48 is the highest you can be. What do you have? 48? Jesus.
I have
43, okay? And oranges, 40 or higher? 42 or higher? 44 or higher? 46? Okay, so what were you? 45. Okay, so we'll have two reality checks for the one. I want you to keep in mind this is just your dominant color. You are all four colors. You may think that you have maybe a point deviation or different point difference between two colors. Those are your two most dominant. That just means that you can easily kind of flow between those two communication styles. Does anybody have three that are really close in number together? Okay. So when that happens, that means that you most easily go between those three. But it also means it's really difficult for people to figure these out because they don't know which one you're operating in. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do an exercise to strengthen your color, if you will. So I'm going to have all of the oranges move to this table, this area over here. I'm going to have all the golds up front, green in this corner, and I want blue that is going to present to the other about what their values, joy, and needs and strengths are. We're going to start with our gold. So we have two gold groups. So we'll start with this table right here first. So if you guys can all get up as a group together. And go ahead and tell us what about your poster. So some of the things that we value are integrity and character. We value people that work hard and are hardworking, who are dependable, and accountability is big for us. Some strengths that we feel like we have are we are very organized. We are very good at building relationships and networking and maintaining communication. Sincere and honest. Honesty is great for us, and being consistent.
Our joys are family, stability, making a difference, and success. And the needs we discussed best to be organized, have structure, accountable, and nobody keep those.
Okay. And then our second walkthrough, which shows the
Our strengths are winning. Goals, neat and be structured.
So we didn't have our section set up too well in the beginning, so we kind of did it at the end. So values are work ethic, honesty, integrity, reliability, intelligence. We like to finish checklist. That's why you see a checklist next to everything we finish. Joys are success, other people's success, family, happy, healthy, and we like to complete items. Our needs, we need to be valued, appreciated. People on board with our process and our ideas and respect the process, and we like to be respected. And then I think some of our strengths were we have a strong sense of right and wrong. We like to do what's right. We like to get it done. We like fact checking, and we like to be educated and prepared. We like others to do that as well.
So, for my goals in general, are you list keepers?
Yes.
Yes. And what do you do when you're done with something on the list?
Check it out.
What if something's not on your list and you do it? Put it on the list. And then cross it off. Okay, yes. Is punctuality important to you? Absolutely. What do you want others to know if they're going to be late? What should they know?
That's very disrespectful of everybody else's time and waiting for you.
How should they communicate to you if they're going to be late?
Have the respect, I would say, speaking for all the goals, you have the respect of all.
Let you know ahead of time, rather than having you sit there and wait.
Don't make it happen.
What is your closet look like? Pretty organized, color coordinated. Why is that? What does that do for you? Time management, efficiency, right? Organized. All the hands, pantries. Yes. So, does anybody have any questions for the goal about any of their values, strengths, capabilities?
I'm just curious if anyone has military background.
He sort of does it with the, yeah.
Thank you.
So,
do you feel about being touched? Like hugging somebody, family, friend?
Except for the workplace.
But generally, you welcome a hug, being close to your family, friends. Are you going to confront conflict head on?
I am actually.
What's your technique?
But it's not because I want to be. I don't have any joy in addressing conflict head on, but it's the most expeditious way to resolve it, so you go back to the root. So it's that necessity. I hate to do it.
Do you ever avoid something and have to deal with it? Shoot it down? So I think it's important, especially when talking to our leaders, to kind of get carers, taking things on, right? If somebody asks you to do something, are you going to try to do it? Kind of almost no matter what, right? You're going to see what you can try to do them. So I think it's important to be mindful that the Blues are going to say yes, but it's not something to be taken advantage of. You think when you're communicating, how do you like when people talk to you? Do you like when they're direct messages going? Do you appreciate the small talk before just getting straight to business? Yeah.
I prefer the small talk, because that's the rest of the time, it's going to have no knowledge.
No, I'm going to defer my brain. How do you feel about small talk?
You talk the entire time and then just put it together and then it's so.
How do you feel about deadlines? I guess you guys deadlines, right? How do you feel about deadlines? Do you always meet your deadlines?
Always. Always. Say always.
Yes. What are deadlines really meant to be? To push them. To push the boundaries, maybe wave as they go by. Honesty. So how do you feel when somebody's dishonest? Is somebody you want to keep around? Well, what problem besides dishonesty? You're done with them? One and done. Second chances? Lose, do you get second chances? All the time, right? All the time. Green, are you going to second chances?
I'm thinking, yeah, when you get the chance, you don't really trust.
It depends on the situation. Are you going to give everybody a chance? Trust but verify. What about spontaneity, adventure? Needed. Needed. Vacations? Set your time to recharge. What do your vacations look like?
Monday through.
Last minute?
Expedia.
How do folks feel about that? If you were to go to the hotel on the way there, no, stressed. Have you planned? Does everything need to be planned? Does anything need to be planned? Figure it out as you go, right?
Well, they're perfect for central job.
How do you feel about being on time?
Proud.
If you're on time, you feel proud you're on time, right? Are you frequently late to meetings?
Eric, beyond.
You have to start till you get there, right?
Yeah, maybe I just don't want to take it. Yeah.
Who do you like to keep around? far as family, friends, community, fun-loving type of people. Tend to be based around fun-loving, adventurous, honest. Anybody have any questions for our So like I said,
So enough of the fun and games, time to get serious. I'm Alan Yamamoto, I'm your Behavioral Health Director. And we have Gabriel Orozco, who's our Behavioral Health Accountant. And then we have Gary Ernst, walking back there, who's our Fiscal Consultant. Gary has about 50 plus years in the behavioral health field, and I have about 37, 38 years. So between us, I figured we could probably answer any questions that you might have. So I'm going to move on because I know we need to keep it moving. And then as Ray shared with you, we'll break. And we have some natural breaks in here as we move into different sections. So hopefully we can coordinate this in a way where it fits some of those natural breaks. And then you can grab your lunches, because I would hate to keep you from your lunch. And then as you eat, we can continue to present. That way we can get through all of our material and we won't have to feel like you're waiting on us before you can eat. That would be tough competition to match. Okay, so the first slide here is just a basic introduction of what we do in mental health. Now this term specialty mental health might seem unusual to you, but it is an industry term. Specialty mental health is part of the carve-out that was done when we went into managed care, because there are two managed care plans in the county. One is physical health, and that's managed by Anthem Blue Cross in this county. And the other, which was a carve-out, is mental health. It's been carved out as a separate and distinct managed care plan in every county and every state. And so we got the name specialty mental health. Now, as opposed to regular mental health issues, which stayed the responsibility of the managed care plan, such as Anthem Blue Cross. And those are all the disorders that don't fall on the medical necessity list that we're bound to adhere to, which are basically considered all the serious mental disorders. And then all of the less than serious disorders are still under the responsibility of the managed care plan, Anthem. So stuff gets complex, so I'm going to try to break this down. I sort of think of this as our curated list for this group to kind of give you a basic 101 snapshot of behavioral health in the most summarized and easy to follow manner if you don't work in this industry. So moving on to the next slide here. What we do with specialty mental health services at Behavioral Health is we do this series of different types of services. Clinical assessment, outpatient counseling services. I'm not going to read all this to you because you have the slides in front of you. And also in the interest of time, we won't take questions until after the presentation is over, and we can do that by basically, I think we can just kind of hang out for a while, and if you want to come and approach us after, you know, we'll hang out here for a while and you can come and talk to us. So medication support also includes, that's psychiatry services, it also includes telepsychiatry. We started telepsychiatry quite a while back, and we did it as a specialty issue. And it's because certain psychiatrist specialty areas are very difficult for counties to find, all counties to find. And our particular concern was what's considered our threshold language. It's another industry term, and if it's a certain percentage of people who have a primary language in a certain dialect, then that's considered a threshold language. This county only has one threshold language other than English, and that is Spanish. So we needed a Spanish-speaking psychiatrist. So, because we have monolingual clients who only speak Spanish. So the best way for us to get that was through telepsychiatry. So we have a monolingual Spanish-speaking psychiatrist, he also speaks English, of course, who provides services for our monolingual Spanish speakers, and that's 4 hours a week through telepsychiatry. Now, this was really interesting because initially when we started this, we do it at Esperanza Center, by the way, which is our satellite clinic downtown. When we originally started this, we had some apprehensions that people might feel uncomfortable looking at a television screen and then speaking to somebody while they're on the television screen. But over time, I think people have become really accepting of that concept, and it feels pretty natural. It's kind of like when you watch a movie that has subtitles. After a while, you kind of don't even realize you're reading the subtitles. That feeling, I would align is somewhat the same with telepsychiatry. People feel very comfortable with it. So we've expanded telepsychiatry. We have 2 other psychiatrists that come in through telepsychiatry, and they offer services throughout the week. One of those individuals actually comes on site 1 month a year, so he does a combination of face-to-face and telepsychiatry. And then we have regular psychiatry. We have a regular psychiatrist who works a 40-hour week, who's in-house at our main clinic office over on San Felipe. And that combination of all those different elements of psychiatry provides us a lot of medication support services. We also have several nurses. Crisis intervention and stabilization, a very important piece. Most of you think of this as 5150s. It's not just 5150s because crisis interventions can happen even during our daytime hours, and that's when an unexpected event occurs. Somebody comes in and they tell us they need to see somebody right away. And so we have an on-duty person assigned every day that'll break from their regular activities and be able to see somebody if they have an immediate intervention need, as well as our 24/7 coverage through our on-call coverage staff who do a rotation covering. And then inpatient psychiatric hospitalization. There are no inpatient psychiatric hospitals in San Benito County. All of them are out of county. We're mandated to have that service. Our clients need that service. So when we have an acute psychiatric need that can be treated no other way but for somebody to be hospitalized on an inpatient unit, we contract for those services. These beds have become extremely difficult to find for every county. It doesn't matter what size you are. In LA County, they have difficulty finding beds. The volume of business that has expanded in the mental health industry is amazing. There are a lot of different contributing factors. I won't get into it here in the interest of time, but it is an interesting concept that has developed over time and how that need has expanded. Next slide. These again are other partners that we deliver services to, so it's not just your average consumer in the community, because as we all know, as I look around at our county family here, we know we share a lot of the same individuals. We see the same people. And with that, we do some very specialty slivers of service that go out to different areas. So we serve the adult detention facility, the juvenile detention facility. We do mental health evaluations for the court. That used to include all evaluations, even some of the felony evaluations, but the court has decided that we would do primarily the misdemeanor violations. So we're doing that. We also have some special programs that we started with the court, and I think these are quite unique. We have a mental health diversion court, and on our behavioral health is substance abuse also, not just mental health. And then we also have a drug court for substance abuse clients, which is actually started probably 5-6 years ago, and that's working very well also. And it gives the opportunity for individuals who are justice-involved clients who have a high propensity to be repeat offenders sometimes for relatively minor crime issues, but at the same time, you know, they are the responsibility of the court and they do sometimes end up in jail. So we offer them the options of diversion into treatment. And I think with the added impetus of having the court behind us and probation behind us, I think we're able to get a lot of people to adhere to treatment that normally wouldn't. And then Child Protective Services, of course, your clients are a big pool of clients for us as well. And they oftentimes get involved with us through the court system as well. And then we have our Mental Health Service Act array of programs. This is originally called Prop 63. and it has become our greatest source of funding. The Mental Health Service Act, sometimes called the millionaire's tax. When we get to Gabriel's section, he'll dig into that more for you so you understand some of the revenue streams. There's a variety of programs that are components, though, of the Mental Health Service Act. There are basically 6 components we were responsible for implementing, and we've done every one of those so far, with the exception of the capital facilities component, which will be our building, which we'll also share at the end of this presentation where we're at with that. Next slide. So, Mental Health Service Act is our primary source of funding for the Esperanza Drop-In Center. So when we started that back in 2005, remembering that the Mental Health Service Act got passed in November of 2004, we opened our first Esperanza Center. It was over on 5th Street, a relatively small center, and then we expanded it to our present location on San Benito Street, which is a much larger location. And that's really a kind of a wellness and drop-in center, and it takes the feeling for consumers out of coming into a traditional clinic office environment. And so it adds for some ease of access, and it adds for a comfort level where we can still engage clients that might not normally feel comfortable coming into a clinic office. And the Esperanza Center has also become a wonderful launching point for new programs. And we continue to expand the different programs out of that center. I might also add, when we started that center, we talked to the city manager originally because we were concerned about stigma issues, and the city manager was fine with us doing Esperanza Center there. And I can tell you, it's been incident-free. So I think just the fact that Esperanza Center is downtown does wonders for stomping out stigma about mental health. And because I think the community accepts it, we haven't had incidents there, and they get the sense that mental health is an issue that can touch anybody's life. I mean, we're just talking about people like you and I. Prevention and early intervention programs, those are also a big part of our behavioral health programs. Most of these are done through our contractors. So we have Youth Alliance, for example, doing a lot of work out of the schools. That's early prevention work. People that haven't received a diagnosis of mental illness yet. It's kind of the idea of you don't have to fail first in order to be eligible to get help. And we really want to prevent people from ever getting a diagnosis. And so when there are early signs and symptoms of mental illness, that's what prevention and early intervention programs are for. We have other contractors as well, like Suicide Prevention of the Central Coast doing work for us in the community. We have Transcend, which is a individual provider contract. That person does groups for victims of domestic violence. We also do a program out at the San Benito Health Foundation where we have a clinician outstationed out there. And the reason why we did that is because we realized that there was a segment of the population, particularly the migrant farm worker population, that was heavily utilizing San Benito Behavioral Health Foundation. And they were utilizing it because basic dental care and basic physical health care is something you can't deny. I mean, there's no stigma about it. You're going to go in if you have some of those problems. But San Benito Health Foundation also told us that they felt that there was a behavioral health need there, and that it was very difficult to refer somebody to our clinic services because they wouldn't show up. So they felt much better with the plan that we implemented there, where there would be a warm handoff. So somebody actually seen for their physical health care appointment, for their dental appointment, identified as having a behavioral health problem, can be walked over directly to our mental health clinician who's outstationed there for 16 hours a week. We've been doing that service for quite a few years out there. Workforce education training, that was another element of the Mental Health Service Act. This allowed us to basically fund our intern programs because small counties have a difficult time recruiting clinical staff. And our county is very unique in that we're the smallest county that's in the Bay Area. We're the rural county that comes the closest to the Bay Area. So we have a lot of gigantic counties as our neighbors, and they're very wealthy counties, and we have to compete with them for the labor pool. Tremendous challenge for us. So we thought we'd try to grow our own to whatever degree we could. Now, all counties are doing this, but we are also doing it with workforce education and training, where we actually pay stipends for master's level clinicians that need to do their field hours. And we provide their supervision as well as a part of the requirement for their academic achievement. And hopefully some of these people will actually stay in the field, and even more hopefully, they actually stay in the field and become employees of ours. And then we had another element to Mental Health Service Act. It's the Buena Vista Apartments. That actually shouldn't be No Place Like Home, because that's yet to be implemented. The housing element was a partnership with CHISPA. And CHISPA had a low-income housing complex that they opened on Buena Vista. And we bought 4 units there, got 5 beds, because 3 of the units are single-bedroom units. Some of our clients had great difficulty accepting that they'd have to have a roommate and preferred to live by themselves. And one of the units is a 2-bedroom unit that actually has shared clients. Those units are there for the lifetime of the client. They can stay as long as they want, so it is permanent housing. Next slide. I'm going to glide over this pretty quickly here because I already touched on this. These are some of the providers that we have. That should be suicide prevention of the Central Coast, not Redwood Coast. And let's move on to the next slide. Diversion and reentry court, I'm going to move through that also because I commented about that. That was an innovation project. That was one of the elements of the MHSA. Counties were asked to do a component called innovative programs. We were told that these were programs that are supposed to be out of the box thinking, something different. We were even told that it was acceptable, that because of that, these programs would have a high rate of failure, and that was acceptable. They wanted us to be innovative. They wanted us to do something experimental even, if you will. This wasn't so experimental, and it was a bit of a hard sell when we had to get this approved by the Oversight and Accountability Commission. In fact, Captain Bradley from the Sheriff's Department accompanied myself, one of our consultants. We had a veterans element to this. We had the Veterans Outreach person also accompany us before the State Oversight and Accountability Commission and present this project. We got this project approved by that committee by unanimous approval. We had quite a few people on that committee, including Senator Beal, and all of them thought that this was a worthwhile program to approve. And it's diverting mentally ill clients who oftentimes are adverse to taking medications. They may even be medicating with substances, illegal substances, cause a lot of problems out in the community. We have an opportunity to engage them through, albeit voluntary treatment, because they have to agree to this treatment, but it's in lieu of going to jail. So it does have some teeth behind it. And the program's been implemented for 1 year now, and we have assessed over 100 clients. We haven't had 100 clients stick with us, but we've had quite a good rate of success, and we have some real nice success stories to share with you another time. Next slide. So then I'm going to move into client data. Now, client data might sound boring to you, but in the interest of time, it is really the best way to give you a snapshot of how many people we touch, the services we provide, how many hours we provide. So here's the narrative of basically what those slides will reflect. So San Benito County serves approximately 1,200 people. That's in the latest fiscal year, 18-19 data that we have. When we say we serve 1,200 people, that means 1,200 people came in during that fiscal year and they had one or more services. Now, we delivered out of that because there's a variance in how many hours of service every client will receive. Some people come in for one visit and they don't come back. Maybe that's enough for them, or maybe it's just not what they want to do. Other people stay with us for multiple visits in a month, and they stay for a long time. They might have a more chronic and serious illness, and so they are managed throughout the year, and they come in for regular visits. But basically, if you've had one service or more, we're looking at a summary of 13,000 hours of outpatient services that were provided in fiscal year 18-19. And then a breakdown of those clients, approximately 80% of the clients have Medi-Cal. Now, this is really an amazing figure because when I originally came to San Benito, it was an achievement, if you will, and I know that might seem odd, but most behavioral health directors, my colleagues, thought it was really good to be in a county that had a high Medi-Cal rate because Medi-Cal was a good source of revenue. So we weren't at even 50% in San Benito because San Benito had a higher degree of affluence than a lot of your very small rural counties. But right now, we're at 80% of our clients have Medi-Cal. That figure serves to just produce more questions, but some of it you might attribute to Obamacare and the eligibility rates becoming lowered, so more people become eligible for Medi-Cal. And then a breakdown of the age groups. So of all the people that we see, the 13,000 hours, 1,200 clients, the breakdown is 23% are children, age 0 to 15. 21% transition age youth. Transition age youth, another industry term, are ages 16 to 25. But the bulk of our clients, 48% are adults, aged 26 through 59. 8% are older adults, so we're very low in the older adult category. Lots of theories about why that might be. And then the breakdown shows that 54% are female, 64% are Hispanic, and preferred language, 9% prefer Spanish. Preferred language is an interesting term that we pay attention to because preferred language doesn't necessarily mean that a person is monolingual, only speaks Spanish, it's just that they might prefer to speak Spanish given a choice. So for example, and I'm sure that might be the case in many departments. In our department, we have many people that are bilingual staff. They speak both Spanish and English, and they speak both those languages throughout the day, but when they go home, they might not speak English again. So you might say their primary or preferred language is Spanish. So that's what that term means. Next slide. And then we get into the unduplicated count by funding source. So I'm going to give you a quick legend here to read these slides, and you can certainly follow along on your handout as well. But the colored bars, the green bar is for year 16-17. The blue bar is for year 17-18. And the orange bar is our most recent fiscal year of data, 18-19. And then the legend across the top here, Medi-Cal clients, non-Medi-Cal clients, and then your total count of all clients. So real quickly, clients in 18-19, 83.2% was the exact percentage of Medi-Cal, 16.8% non-Medi-Cal. Next slide. And then unduplicated count by age. Again, all through these slides, the green, blue, and orange bars represent the years. Across the top is your legend again, age groupings. And I'll go through the bottom. 0 to 15, 23.3%, 16 to 25, 21.7%, 26 through 59, 46.3%, 60 plus years, 8.7%. Next slide. And then gender, male, female, that's pretty self-explanatory. Green bar, 16, 17, 17, 18, blue bar, orange bar. Again, you'll see that female clients, and this has always been historical through time and throughout any mental health service, female clients have a greater propensity for accepting mental health services. That doesn't mean that they have a greater propensity for mental illness. A greater acceptance of the help for mental health services is what that means. Okay, next slide, please. Race, ethnicity. This is an interesting slide also. And the bar across the top here that I'll run my pointer through shows the ethnic groupings. So you'll see by far, historically throughout the years, 18, 19, we're seeing more Hispanic clients, pretty large group of white Caucasian clients. And this reflects the diversity in San Benito County. And basically, we're not like a real diverse county because we basically have two ethnic groupings, white, Caucasian, Hispanic, Black, American Indian, Alaska Native, Asian, Pacific Islander, relatively few in the county, and the numbers definitely reflect that. That being said, I might share with you that as we are the county mental health plan, we have a contract with the state. We are held accountable to provide services in any language, including sign language. So we do have a language line, and fortunately we're not one of those counties that has 17 threshold languages like Sacramento County does. So it makes it a little easier for us because we only have to concentrate on providing services in Spanish and English primarily. But we have had people call us that might speak Farsi or might speak French, and we have to find an interpreter. More common and difficult one is somebody that requires sign language, somebody with a hearing impairment. Okay, next slide, please. Preferred language, again, I won't spend much time on this because I've already explained this. Preferred language difference versus monolingual. But you will see by far most people have preferred language of Spanish even though they may be bilingual. Okay, move on, next slide. Oh, we're at it? Well, good. I did a good job of moving us through that then. We're at break time, and if you want to go ahead and grab your lunches, we can do that now, and then we'll resume when people get reseated. As people get their lunch and get seated, and we're gonna whip on through this pretty quick here to try to keep us on schedule. So the next slide was about average hours per client by service type. I'm not going to get into that, but basically all you need to really understand is that all these different modes of service are the basic categories of services we provide, and that's how many hours are provided. So at your leisure, you can take a look at that. If you have questions for us, we'll hang out later for a while and you can ask us. Next slide. So as I mentioned, behavioral health has substance abuse also as an element. It's a much smaller element of behavioral health. And pretty much all the same types of service, but directed towards substance abusing clients. Move on. Substance abuse treatment services. As I said, it's much smaller, 250 to 300 people each year, and 8,000 hours of outpatient services each fiscal year. That probably is the total there from 18 to 19. These are the age groups. By far, again, it's the 26 to 59-year-old group. 70% of those clients are the bulk of what we see in substance abuse treatment. And also you should understand the majority of those clients are not coming to us because they voluntarily decided that they want to change their life. They're coming to us because they're mandated clients, so they have to complete treatment as a mandate from the courts. And that's probably 90% of the clients that we see.
Alan, if I could ask a question right there.
Yeah.
For a population of about 60,000 people, is that kind of the normal, roughly portion to the population that we should be treating? Is that comparable percentage-wise to maybe other counties or within the region?
Yeah, I haven't made those comparisons, so I don't have, I think, the answer to your question, but I'm inclined to believe that it's unique to each county. And what I found is when we went into this new type of Medi-Cal, where the services got expanded to a wider array of services being available and Medi-Cal reimbursed, the bulk of all that business increased primarily through contract providers. So some counties have a lot of contract providers, and those contract providers are doing the bulk of the business, and they do a lot of marketing to get clients in, particularly to residential facilities, whereas we don't really have many of those resources, and that kind of marketing is dependent more on the provider source to do that marketing than us. Mm-hmm. So not an exact answer to your question, but I think it probably helps. Next slide. We'll move on through this. These pretty much follow the same format as the other slides, so you know how to read them now, and it's just the bar graphs that show years and ages. Next slide. Race, ethnicity, same thing. Preferred language, average hours per client. And now we get to funding sources, and this is where I'm going to turn it over to Gabriel, because this is a whole new section here, and another specialty piece to understand is where our money comes from. Behavioral health has become a huge business, and there's a lot of money flowing into it. So I'm going to hand this mic over to Gabriel and the pointer.
Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gabriel. I'm one of the accountants for the Behavioral Health Department. And I'm going to be going over our funding slides and a little bit more information about the funding we receive and areas that we use it in and everything that has to do with that. So primary funding sources that we have is 1991 realignment, also referred to as realignment 1, 2011 realignment, also referred as realignment 2, our Mental Health Service Act, which Alan went over briefly a little bit ago, and we use the moniker MHSA for it. We also have the Medi-Cal reimbursement. We, for that, use FFP, so federal. And then we get some funding from the County General Fund. And other source of funding that we receive, those come from small grants, patient fees, and any insurance payments that we receive from other kind of insurance, private insurances. So this is a chart that I put together, and this shows our funding, which is going to be for this year, 1920. And this is proportionate to the amount of funding that we expect to receive. Some of these we've already received, and some of these is going to be what we are expected and are on track to receive. So our total amount that we're on track to receive this year is $10.8 million. From this funding, the biggest funding, as Alan said, and the one that we utilize the most is this MHSA, so it's the big purple section. So for that, we have $6.5 million. Out of that $6.5 million, current funding that we're going to be receiving this year is approximately close to $4 million. So out of the difference, $2.5 million is reversion money that we're using from previous year funds. So previous years, if we don't spend our MHSA dollars, and the way that MHSA is spent is last dollar spent, so we first have to spend all our other funding sources before we can get into eating MHSA dollars. So as previous years, if we had some MHSA dollars that were left off on the table, that would be the first money that we're going to be spending. So that's why our biggest component here is MHSA, and 2.5 out of that 6.5 is old money, reversion money that we're going to be spending. The next biggest section is FFP, so that's our Medi-Cal reimbursement money. And that has slowly been growing over the course of the years, because as we've been getting more staff and providing more services to the community, we've been able to bill Medi-Cal for more services and recoup some of that money to use it back within the community in order to provide more services, hire more staff, and then increase programming. The next biggest section is this Realignment 1. And Realignment 1 it's our base funding, money that we receive from the state. This has pretty much been arbitrary the same. It hasn't changed over the course of the year. There has been some growth, but that is a separate little amount that is part of this other funding that we receive. The fourth biggest is Realignment 2. And for this instance, Realignment 2 is a little bit more complex in that the way that we can divide that amount of funding is that it's split between both mental health and substance abuse services. So this one is a flexible funding that if we need to subsidize in some instances some of the areas in substance abuse, or on the other side, on the mental health side, we can then split in the way that we can divvy up the percentages to where we can divide that funding. And the last two little components that we have here is anything other, as I kind of mentioned in the previous slide. Other comes from client fees, patient fees, insurance fees, any small grants that we have. And the smallest component that we have is the amount that we receive from the general fund. It's $45,000, and this has been, it's been the amount that we've received over the course of the years, and I don't think this has either gone up or down. It's just been the pledge that we've always gotten from the general fund. And then that totals out to our 10.8 million figure. So I'm going to kind of go through all these kind of funding sources with a little bit more detail on how, we get to this money from the state and a little bit on how we spend it. So the 1991 realignment, this funding comes from the state, and the state collects these funds through a half cent on state sales tax. It also collects them through state vehicle licensing fees, and it collects them through vehicle licensing fee collection. And like I mentioned, this 1991 realignment is the minimum base funding received every year, so we're always going to be receiving this amount. And this is one of our other kind of areas I'm going to touch on is on match funding. And realignment one, in this case 1991 realignment, can be used as local match. The next one that I have here is 2011 realignment. And 2011 realignment comes from a 1.0625 sales tax from the state. And this funding is primarily used for early periodic screening, diagnosis, and treatment. That's a mouthful. So us in the mental health world, we shorten it to EPSDT. And this is primarily for children's Medi-Cal. For the early periodic screening diagnosis component of it. It's also part of this realignment money comes through managed care. So this comes for inpatient care. So if we have any clients that are seen at a hospital that can bill directly to the state for these services, these costs are then offset. And this managed care component. So yeah, so this managed care component is the inpatient funding that we receive to fund any clients that are sent to any of the inpatient facilities. And like I mentioned before, this funding is on the county's discretion on how we can split it. And it's split between the mental health and substance abuse programs. And on the substance abuse side, it kind of gives a brief breakdown of the different kind of areas that we spend it in. It's either through through residential, drug court programs, drug Medi-Cal programs, non-drug Medi-Cal programs, and with all this, we can arbitrarily distribute these funds however we please. So if we see that we want to implement a program with the substance abuse program, sort of like if we want to do something with parolees or something like that, then we can increase funding by the way that we arbitrarily divide the funding into all these different areas. We can increase it into that segment. And then, like I mentioned, also this is also part of the local match that we can do for matching. The biggest component, like I mentioned, is the Mental Health Service Act, and this money is generated through a 1% tax on any California resident that is making over $1 million in income. There's 6 components that this money gets divided into. It's divided into CSS, Community Services and Support, Prevention, Early Intervention, PEI, Innovation, INN, Capital Facilities and Technological Needs, CFTN, Workforce Education and Training, and then Mental Health Client Housing. So approximately 0.1% of taxpayers are affected by this because there's a lot of millionaires in California, so so we generate a lot of income into this, but it's still, the percentage of people that are affected is still very low. And this funding requires, the MHSA plan requires us to put together a 3-year plan and annual updates, which are sent to the board, our board of supervisors for their approval, which with this plan, we show all the programs that we're trying to implement that hit into all our different categories, and it shows how we're spending our funds. And then with the annual updates, we have to present to the board and to MHSA accountability in order to let them know, how we're spending all this funding. So we're not just putting it and just storing it somewhere. We have to let them know exactly how we are spending all these different, into all these different components.
One question for you. I'm looking for one component of the revenue stream that is kind of missing, at least in my mind, is, so whatever monies we get from the state to run our programs here in San Diego County, how is that figured? Is that based on population? Is it based on need or caseload, or how is that working?
There's a combination of factors that go into this. One of the factors is population, and then
Yeah, there's, each one of the funding sources have a different component in there, or percentages that they use: population, need. Those are the two primary ones, but it's split up, like, for example, in the MHSA part, it's split up in 6 different ways. And that changes from year to year. We get a methodology on that every year. And so the main ones that can go up and down are the MHSA component.
Right.
And the behavioral health 2, which is the realignment 2 funding. Those two can go up and down from year to year based on those changes at the state level on those programs.
Okay, and then that's, as those changes occur, we adjust our 3-year plan within the update?
The 3-year plan is on a cycle of every 3 years that it gets updated. The annual plans are discretionary. If you choose to add a new program area, it has to come before the board in an annual plan. Getting back to the funding issue, MHSA funding was created on a formula based by a statistician that was utilized by the state. His name is Holzer, and it was a formula based on prevalence rate of mental illness in the counties. And then they also looked at penetration rate, how many people would actually walk through your front door, because not everybody that has mental illness will come to a clinic for service. And so that's the basic formula that was utilized to allocate MHSA funds to every county. And that really hasn't been revisited, that formula. You know, it has some growth factor only in the sense that there's variance in how many millionaires get taxed every year in California.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that simple.
yeah, they really did their work when they put this Mental Health Service Act together. So we have a little other piece that I had to this. So MHSA funds are distributed monthly, and any money that is susceptible to be reverted back to the state, so say that we don't spend it, this money, the state then resends that back to the county, and it gets included into our MHSA funding, and then we have to put it together with the MHSA plan to make sure that it gets spent. And also, this is also funding that can be used for match. Our next piece that I have is Medi-Cal reimbursement. So us being the primary medical provider in San Benito County, we see a lot of the, like Alan mentioned, the majority of them, 80% are Medi-Cal clients. So for these clients, we generate claims that get submitted to Medi-Cal for reimbursement. The majority of these regular Medi-Cal clients, we receive a 50% federal fund, and the federal government tells us that we have to use match from non-federal funding sources. So this match that we're talking about comes from either MHSA, Realignment 1, or Realignment 2. So this isn't new money, this is money that we already have in-house. It's just a way of the state or the federal government telling us, we're gonna give you, if you bill us for $100, we're gonna give you $50, and the other $50 you already have from one of your other funding.
So we've referenced match quite a bit, and I think what's important to understand is the Medicaid program, which is Medi-Cal in California, does not exist in every state. It's an opt-in program, and if states chose to opt in, there's a match for the federal dollar, and it's roughly a 50% match. So as Gabriel was saying, if you bill $100, you have to show that you have matchable money here locally, and it can't be federal money, otherwise it's a double dip. So when Gabriel referenced that matchable dollars on these different funding categories, it's State Realignment 1, State Realignment 2, State MHSA. Now those are already allocations that come here. So the state views that as you already have your match to the federal government. However, that match is being utilized in-house for a variety of things. But in order for it to be matched to Medi-Cal, that variety of things, whether it be building, whether it be cleaning supplies, whether it be staff, has to be directly related to the service that you're billing the federal government for, and then it's considered like match in kind. So that's why we use that term in that way.
So like, continuing back on this, on the Medi-Cal reimbursement, like I said, the higher amount of claims that we submit are for regular Medi-Cal clients, and those are paid 50/50. There are other claims that are paid at a higher amount, and those would be for enhanced, and then any clients that fall under the Affordable Care Act, the expanded policy. So those are paid at a higher amount, but over the course of the years, with new leadership at the federal level, we've had these amounts continue to drop off, which was the original plan of the Affordable Care Act. As clients were able to take care of themselves a little bit more, the funding that came from federal government began to drop a little bit. So these claims are both submitted for the mental health and substance abuse, and for any network providers that we have that we utilize through that provide Medi-Cal eligible services. So all of these are then submitted, and all of these are billed on an interim rate that the county sets with the Department of Healthcare Services. So we can't bill for anything above a rate that we don't have negotiated with them. We can bill for anything below, but why would you bill for something below when there's already a rate set? So, and anytime that there is cost outside of this, by the time that we do our cost reports and submit those to the state, there is a process through settlement, and we have an interim settlement and then a final audit, where if there are costs that are eligible to be paid by Medi-Cal, we do receive cost report settlements. And this is also, this is then federal dollars that go back into our program through our cost reports. So, talking a little bit about match. Now I'm going to go through two slides that kind of break down what match is. I give that brief example of the $100. So this kind of puts it a little bit into pictures. So we have San Benito County Behavioral Health right here, and what we do is we see clients who generate claims. We submit those claims to DHCS, which operate with the federal government. Then the federal government, DHCS, then sends that claim back to us in the form of payment, and it's paid 50% through federal money, and then the other 50% comes through us in the form of match, which is, like Alan mentioned, money that we already have in-house. And that is either through the MHSA money, Realignment 1 money, or Realignment 2 money. And this is all matching kind, which is money that we already have in our pockets, and the state is just telling us that you already got paid ahead of time. You're just billing us, and we're only paying for 50% of it. And then in other situations, a little bit of a higher percentage, but the majority of them, I would say about 80 to 90% of them are regular, and those are all paid at 50%. And so this is match county to DHCS. In some instances, we have other forms of match, and that would be match that comes from a provider to a county to DHCS. So that would be when we have a provider and the provider bills us. So let's take that example of the $100 bill. So the provider provides services to clients. The provider then submits a $100 bill claim to San Benito County, and then San Benito County then pays the claim to the network provider. So we get billed $100, we have to pay $100 to the network provider. So then what we then do with that claim is we submit that to DHCS. But DHCS follows the same pattern as on my previous slide, whereas they will only pay for 50% of it, and the other 50% of it has to come from matching kind. So what that means is that for a claim that got submitted where we paid a provider $100, we're only going to get 50% or $50 from that back into our pockets. So what the bigger picture here that I want to kind of let you guys and hope you guys understand is that if we're paying $100 out of pocket to the network provider for them to provide this service, they're taking $50 that we could be using, like Alan mentioned, to leave in-house to provide either any support staff or pay for the rent for the building or pay for any office supplies or anything that's there to do in the facility. So that's $50 that we had already received that's now going out of our pocket and paying for that network provider. If there was a policy or something written where, let's say, they were okay with only taking 50%, like we're receiving from the federal government, that would be, I mean, from the county's perspective, that would be a good thing. But why would any provider be willing to bill $100, only receive 50 of it back? So that's kind of like a situation that we run into sometimes where a provider just like us has to be paid for all the services they provide. So in this case, we pay the full 100% to those. And then now we're kind of down to the last little bit that we have. So this is more to do now with our new facility that we are putting together. And this all comes from our funding that we've been able to allocate to our capital tech facilities needs. As you know, this is one of the components of MHSA. And we've been able to allocate funding into a specific fund that is being geared towards our new facility that we're trying to build. And then for that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Alan, who's going to finish us off, unless there's questions for the other funding.
No, no questions?
All right, we're going to wrap it up here for you. So Behavioral Health Center aerial shot, and then I'll take you through the interior shot so you can use that as a reference point. Note that there are these 3 arms going out. The reason why they were built in that way is to allow for every one of the clinical offices to have a window outside. And then even on the interior part of the building where offices may not have had a window, they have a shot to an open air courtyard. So they still have a window. And then on the back side, you can't see it in here, there's even an outdoor area for having staff break and lunches. And that's the front of the building. Okay, next slide. Interior shot, reference point again, the 3 fingers that you saw going out. Front door, front entrance. The open air atrium, and that's what I mean, these offices here still have a window opening out. All of these offices, of course, have windows. Something unlike our present building has, where we actually have windows that go to nowhere, and it's dark inside. So this building is really built for behavioral health services. And then the next slide. We're going to have our groundbreaking ceremony Tuesday, March 10th at 12:30, and there will be invitations going out. And there's some particulars about the building you can read about, what the square footage is, how many clinical offices, how many substance abuse offices, case manager offices, and then other general space. And then you have our architect's rendition. It's in your handout. Shows you basically what the interior of the building will be like. It'll be a very professional, client-friendly building, and I think our clients are really going to enjoy when we have this, and we will be able to expand the staff. So that concludes our presentation, and we'll turn it over to whoever the next presenter is. If anybody has questions, we can hang out for a while and answer them, unless Ray, if you wanted to take questions now or not.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Hold on, Ray. Any questions from the board? Ray?
I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I got one question.
Yes.
Of these dollars here, how much money is coming out of general fund?
There's no general fund coming out of here. The reference to the general fund pie was, what, $45,300. It's been the same since day one when I came 19 years ago. Never changed. It's called maintenance of effort. It's a mandate that had to be maintained. Some counties are what they call overmatch counties, and they actually put more money in. They put overmatch in usually to cover money that they don't have for services that are non-Medi-Cal reimbursable. And
So
there are a number of counties.
It's all state funded, nothing coming out of our general fund, roughly.
Correct. As you recall, there was a bond that was pulled, and the bond was for about $10 million. We got a very favorable rate at 2.497, I believe the rate was. So the debt servicing on it will be very good. We'll be debt servicing with mental health dollars, primarily a combination of realignment, Mental Health Service Act. Because remember, part of the match is sustaining a building to house your people. That counts as part of the Medi-Cal match. So that's how that'll work for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask one question from the public. There was a question about the growth that is occurring within our community, within our county. And you went through the calculations and you stated that the significant amount of money that we are receiving is from the millionaire tax, correct?
Correct.
And so how is that, are we receiving more funds based on population that we're seeing today, maybe not millionaires, or is it the millionaire tax which has to cover that, I guess is what I'm asking. I don't know if that's clear enough.
Are you asking if the Mental Health Service Act funds actually grow commensurate to growth of the county?
Yeah, I mean, I know you talked about the percentages and there being a certain calculation, and I know a lot of those are based from the statewide percentages, but the local percentages, how do they affect that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So Gary, is there anything in the formula that allows for growth of our Mental Health Service Act allocation related to the population growth of the county?
Part of that population does include our own population of the county. I think it's around 25% of the formula is probably related to population.
So that answer is yes, there is some factoring that'll be commensurate to growth, commensurate to the Mental Health Service Act allocation for our county.
And I can check that out later if you get
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Mr. Chair, we're going to request to swap 4 and 5 on our agenda.
Okay. Okay, so we'll do opportunity zones next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you want to open it up for a question from the public for the last item. I'm not sure. Anyways. All right, so number 5, we're going to be discussing the opportunity zone. We have multiple speakers coming in. We have a speaker, Dave Smith, co-founder from CalAugs, as well as Peter Ansel, senior advisor from Senator Anna Caballero's office, as well as Aaron Johnson to highlight the local economic development corporation and leveraging the opportunity zone. But prior to that, I'd like to invite our own RMA director, Harry Mamberginis. He will be opening this item up for our discussion, and he has a presentation, a PowerPoint to go ahead and kick us off. So, Harry?
From the federal level all the way down to the local level. So, there we go. In the federal side, you'll hear more about this later on the opportunity zones. This is one of the few major programs that is out there available with the feds, where it involves investors that need to defer any capital gains on something they have now, and it allows them to, if they invest within these opportunity zones, and we have one which covers the western part of the county primarily. Very little of Hollister is in it, but a lot of the western side of the county is. But it allows investors to reduce their taxes from that prior gain to up to 15%, and then pay almost no tax on profits from the project within the opportunity zone. You'll hear a little bit more about it. It has not been as active in California because our California tax code still requires the payment of the 13% capital gains tax. I know the governor has made some efforts to move legislation through that would eliminate that or make our state tax code compatible with this program, but that's not happened yet. But again, we'll hear more about it later. Other major federal programs that we're aware of, there's work opportunity tax credits for employers hiring individuals from certain communities. SBA loan programs are still a very solid guarantee program that helps small businesses get loans to expand their business. The Export-Import Bank, this really involves more international buyers, and then the EB-5 program, which is aimed at foreign nationals that can obtain a green card if they invest at least $1 million or $500,000 in a designated area. Under the state government, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Business Economic Development, has put out the Innovation Hub program, which started in 2013 after the demise of redevelopment. There were 15 iHubs, now there's only 5. There's really not a lot of support from the state on this. I had developed one in San Joaquin County when I was there, and it basically was our local incentives primarily. There really wasn't a whole lot from the state. There are other programs that aim at expanding businesses. The California Competes tax credit, research and development tax credits, net operating loss carryover, and alternative energy and advanced transportation, use and sales tax exclusions, as well as manufacturing and research development, again aimed at getting technology and new businesses in the state. The California Air Resources Board has air quality improvement programs, incentive programs to fund clean vehicles, alternative renewable fuel technology programs. These are available to businesses, rebate projects, lawn and garden equipment, farm equipment, hybrid off-road equipment, and zero-emission truck and bus voucher incentives, again aimed at reducing pollution, but nonetheless they are available incentives. And then on the financial side, California still has industrial development bond programs, which offer up to $10 million for acquisition, rehabilitation, and manufacturing for private companies. The California Capital Access Program, which encourages banks to make loans available to small businesses, primarily geared again towards electric vehicle, help at-risk businesses comply with the ADA, and seismic retrofitting, very specific programs. Also retrofitting diesel trucks, which helps the trucking activities in the state. Heavy-duty vehicle air quality loan programs and recycling programs, very specific kinds of grants. Now, on the local level, we have the workforce training. Is Enrique here? Okay. Basically, that's run, it's federal money, but it's run through, provides vocational training, on-the-job training, work experience training, and employment readiness. And we're very active in it through Enrique and his department. The other thing we have going is the EDC partnership. You'll hear from them a little bit later. We're very excited about them bringing in a new director to help do economic development projects jointly. And now on our own level within the department, obviously implementation of the general plan, rezoning of properties to conform to the general plan, to actually have sites that are zoned, and I'll use the term shovel-ready, I think is a major factor in attracting new businesses so that they don't have to wait for a major rezoning process. We've been making efforts recently to expedite our permitting process as well for priority economic development projects. And of course, the other thing we keep hearing, when are you going to finish Highway 25? that's going to be a major plus for the county now that we do have Measure G and the ability to fix that major access into the county.
Harry, before we go on to that slide, if you go back to the last one, on expediting the permitting, we were exploring prior to your time a program to, help us make it more conducive for the applicant, as well as transparency to the public, and where we could see how that permit or application is being moved forward. Are we kind of improving our technology in the planning department to kind of incorporate those tools?
We are. We have had some glitches with the Excella program. We're trying to work through those, which will really give us that higher visibility, transparency that you're asking for. But we're making every effort to do that.
Yeah. Is it the same program we were looking at? It was a couple of years ago now, or did we kind of abandon that program?
The Acela program is the program that that actually we moved forward with,
right?
And tying that into the ERP system, along with some of the other systems that we have. But yes, that is the one. It was a web-based one, so I think that's where some of the glitches are compared to it being premise-based. But I'm not sure if you're looking at something different.
Well, we were kind of trying to improve and incorporate some technology in the process, whereas
well, we're looking at things like online permit applications, the ability to look at permits online. I know Gary's been working on that with our building department, and we'll continue to look at ways to make the system work a lot better and more visible. Thank you. Okay, I wanted to showcase some of the projects that we have been working on that I consider economic development. A lot of them have an agricultural bent because of where we are and what we do. We have a nursery, the Kawahara Nursery out of Morgan Hill, that is wanting to develop a major facility near Anzar High School in the San Juan area. Fire Clay Tile, we've been working with recently. They have an application in now to expand their tile manufacturing. They're a very high quality tile company. They want to stay here. They want to add 50 jobs. And the dark gray shows the expansion area that they're proposing to do on their site. So we're trying to move this into the system quickly so that they can get under construction this year.
On that one, we've had a couple of meetings, and they were under a pretty tight time constraint. Are we be able to still meet that?
We are, as long as they bring in their actual application. They had a preliminary application in, and we have been in conversations with them the last few weeks to bring in the material as soon as possible so we can meet the schedule. I think we can get them to Planning Commission, assuming they submit everything soon, for the April meeting. I would have preferred March, but I don't think it's possible now. But they understand. I mean, they know that we've been trying to be helpful, and they're very appreciative of it.
I appreciate all the work that you and your planning staff was doing on that to meet their deadlines.
Okay, moving along here. The Suncoast Organic Bakery Project, they're expanding. This is more on the agritourism type of businesses that we're seeing. Very, very important to get this one done. Commercial cannabis business, there's a pre-application on Highway 25 near Hudner Lane, which proposes 100 acres where they will be indoor cultivating cannabis. That we're expecting an application, a formal application, very soon.
Eric? Once again, that was indoor, correct?
Indoor, yes, sir.
So
absolutely.
They'll have any type of odor mitigation and.
That's all being factored in. Yes, they're doing a preliminary study right now.
Thank you.
I have it, and we're looking at all the aspects of what we learned from hemp. We're going to be able to use on this one as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Back here. Big League Dreams is a sports concept that's been looking at us as well as several other cities in the South Bay area up to San Jose. They build replica sports facilities on public land, and it generates, from their experience in other cities, a lot of other economic development, including hotels and retail that come around these because of all the leagues that move around. This is a very preliminary look-see right now, and we'll be continuing to discuss this. The Pacinas Ranch is wanting to do some relatively minor expansion, again, agritourism. Likewise, the Lone Tree Ranch has a use permit amendment application to add some minor facilities to expand their use as well. Recently, the board approved the Ridgemark retail project of 30,000 square feet. We're looking forward to that being under construction later this year. We have a pre-application for we have an autonomous vehicle project application on the Christopher property at Highway 156 and San Felipe Road. That also proposes a hotel and some other related retail on the lower part of the property. Of course, the Floriani Ranch project is in the pipeline as well. It proposes, again, the autonomous vehicle, the area in blue on the right, as well as related offices and other uses for that. San Juan Oaks, right where we are now, the area in pink on the right proposes a large retail area. There's no specific timeline for that right now, but I do want to make the board aware that that is, again, a potential retail sales tax generating development that would enhance the residential project, which would propose 1,000 age-restricted residential units to the left on that drawing. Calera Wine, we recently approved a wine tasting room on Cienega. There are others that are looking at some expansion that we want to help out. And this was approved in 2019, and I'm not sure of the exact status right now, but an agritourism facility on Pacheco, which would be a retailing kind of operation. And the hemp campus that you approved earlier this year off of Gilroy Gates near Fraser Lake Road. And that should generate some revenues again for the county. And that's kind of a little infill of what we're doing locally for economic development. Any questions?
Questions?
So that I have a question, and it pertains to basically the perspective of these new these business developments, and to a certain extent, agricultural type beneficial developments. What would the impact be of that new initiative that came forward in the papers, mentioned?
Well, preliminarily, I think the main impact is going to be on lands that are zoned agricultural now that would have to be rezoned to some other use. So a couple of these may be impacted by that. We're thinking possibly the Christopher Ranch project as well as perhaps the Floriani project as well. I don't know. We have to really look at that. There's a lot. I know our attorneys are looking at that right now, but I don't know if Barbara wants to comment anymore, but I think we're going to be looking carefully at those impacts on our projects. But the agritourism ones, I think, are in good shape.
Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you for the presentation. I was curious to see if you've had any interest in opportunity zones, and then we were at a opportunity zone educational seminar over in Monterey through Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, and we talked about doing some sort of advertising or perhaps through the EDC, some sort of outreach and having some sort of flyer on San Benito County with our opportunity zones spelled out so that we could advertise, so to speak, that we have these zones. And I was wondering if we, number one, had any interest, and number two, can we get something like that done so we can get out to the community and the business community as well.
Definitely have interest in doing that. In fact, we already approached one of the projects, Fireclay, about that. The question is getting investors lined up, and again, the difficulty.
So I think we're sitting in one now, right? An opportunity zone, or this whole.
We have an opportunity zone, which
kind
is
of
one of the drawings. It's quite large.
Okay.
Again, it's covering the western part of the county.
Yeah, very valuable.
And Fireclay is within that. We've tried to work with them on
Supervisor
that.
Medina?
One last question, and I will leave you alone. The question is, all these projects we spoke about today, or proposed projects, they are for industrial use only, correct? There's not houses on them or any of that nature?
Well, San Juan Oaks is a multi-use.
I'm sorry, with the exception of San Juan Oaks.
Yeah, the others are all basically commercial or industrial.
Which in turn, what does that do in revenue for our county?
The commercial generally will give you some sales tax revenue to increase our, and we desperately need to increase that. The industrial, if there is an opportunity for point of sale, where we looked at that with a couple of these, that can generate some more sales tax. Perhaps the nursery, for example, they definitely are committed to looking at that. The job creation is the other aspect. So Fireclay, for example, is going to add 50 jobs.
And then those monies will go into the general fund, which will help pay for our employee infrastructure, road improvements.
Exactly. It will all help in various aspects. Impact fees, sales tax, any taxes they generate, anything we can get from the projects will help us immensely.
Thank you, Harry.
Supervisor Patello?
One of the slides, and I did question the expediency of the permitting process, and you've done just a terrific job so far at RMA, Harry, and I think we are all appreciative of it. But there's forces out there that really don't want us to do anything. They don't want us to have sales tax. They don't want us to have jobs in this community. And every one of these projects are, good projects scattered throughout the entire county. And we have never in our time have had the opportunity to move forward some of these businesses that we have applying right now, and it takes time. What can this board do to our part to help you do your job and have these job-creating sales tax, TOT tax type of permits process quicker so we could get this thing done and really provide the level of services that all these people in here are interested in providing and do a better job fixing even our roads.
Thank you for your support. I think we haven't got to the budget yet, but I would suspect some level of staff addition in the planning area would be helpful to process these applications. Again, I'd like to continue to work with the EDC and their new director to develop brochures, other material to help advertise the opportunity zone and the other economic benefits we have in the county. I think just tying, I could see one document online as well as paper that talks about all the other state and federal benefits that are available. So when somebody is looking at the county, they can see that we've been active in doing a lot of this. So I'm very definitely interested in continuing that.
Harry, I think we created an ad hoc committee of Supervisor Gilio and either Medina or Hernandez. Medina, Supervisor Medina and Gilio, to sit down with you and see recommendations that you can come back to the board to expedite some of these projects. And I would recommend that you contact both Supervisor Medina and Gilio, see what tools you can fast track these projects and be consistent with all the other projects that might come forward too.
Thank you. I will do that.
Okay, perfect.
Mr. Chair, I just had one. I mean, the opportunity zones obviously is a big game changer. Is there an element that could be, to a certain extent, articulate that message to the public? Just because it's a lot of, there's a lot of obviously detail to it, and to have a message that gets them to understand the value of these things to our community?
Well, again, I would feel more comfortable if the legislature moved forward with the tax code changes that are needed to make us as competitive as other states are. Right now, we're at a disadvantage. And I mean, we can continue to work through that, but again, you'll probably hear a little more from another speaker on the program in more detail and maybe some other success stories, but we'll continue to work at it as best we can to see if it can be used as an incentive. But again, you need investors, you need somebody that needs a tax break to make it work.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Harry. I mean, my biggest reference was just, what do we do now? The legislature is not, they're not going to move for San Benito County. They're going to move at their time. What are we going to do now to send that message of the value of opportunity zones to our community?
Well, again, I think looking at developing the collateral material, advertising its availability, in development literature and out in with realtors and others, to know that we have something available is definitely something we can do.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Hold on, Ray. That concludes your...
Well, if anything, I just wanted to piggyback on Supervisor Gilio's comments. I think they're warranted, and I appreciate Supervisor Medina and Gilio being on that committee, and I would definitely support and encourage them to do what they can to make this happen.
Thank you.
That's all.
Okay. Ray?
I was just going to add that with regards to our next speaker, we're going to have Dave Smith, co-founder from CalAu's, discuss with your board what other jurisdictions are doing and what we could do to kind of mirror the ones that are excelling with the opportunity zones, as well as looking at the 101 and basically what is it and how can we leverage it. So that's going to be our next speaker, as well as the legislature. That's what we invited Dave Smith Peter Ansel, from Senator Ana Caballero's office to elaborate a little bit more with regards to the legislature, what's on the horizon, what is actually occurring at the state level to help local jurisdictions like us to actually leverage the opportunity zone. So we're glad to have them. I believe we're done, Harry, on your side. So I'd like to go ahead and invite up David Smith, and he is the co-founder of CalAu's, a nonprofit trade association dedicated to maximizing the transformative potential of opportunity zones in California. He is also the founder and CEO of X Labs and consultancy that advises executives to realize greater impact through the power of courage, connection, and community. So he has a wealth of experience with regards to working with other jurisdictions and as well as other clients, and he is a reputable individual that addresses California opportunity zones. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and I know that they're working on the PowerPoint right now, but invite up David.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and discuss opportunity zones here in California with you. My presentation is sort of structured a little bit of describing what CalOZ is, a little bit more around what opportunity zones are, and then sort of leading into and what can counties and localities do to help incentivize. Really on this last thread of questions is what can you do to help incentivize people to look at opportunity zones. So thank you again for the opportunity to join you here. So what is CalOZ? We're a trade association dedicated to maximizing the transformative potential of qualified opportunity zones in California. We were founded just last March by myself and my co-founder, Kunal Merchant. And we represent a coalition of top California voices focused on opportunity zones. These range from various strategic partners, and I realize this is very small logos here, but ranging from some of the top organizations and kind of think tanks thinking about economic development throughout the state, from California Forward to Accelerator for America or Milken Institute, the Economic Innovation Group, to a number of other regional and local entities from the East Bay Leadership Council or Contra Costa Economic Partnership to the Central Valley Community Foundation or Silicon Valley Community Foundation or the Bay Area Council, as well as other local cities and counties. We're actually very pleased that San Benito County is now a member of CalOZ. And we have over 50 members across the state and a network of about 1,600 individuals, investors, entrepreneurs, and other like-minded individuals trying to make sure that opportunity zones are taken seriously here in California. Our initiatives really follow four major buckets. One is policy, and that's the one that I'm going to probably be talking about most today, which is we focus on policy with a triple bottom line mindset, which is when we're thinking about the policies that we need to pursue, they should make sure that California is competitive in a market of investors, as was just mentioned. We're competing not only regionally and against different projects that are happening throughout the state, but we're competing with every other state in the country, many of which who are further advanced as to where our state is in terms of embracing the opportunity zone incentive. With that in mind, we also want to make sure that we're focused on thinking around what California does on opportunity zones also needs to be taking an equity and sustainability lens, as California is always thinking about how do we think about the strong standards and safeguards and metrics to help protect and empower local communities, and certainly ensuring that as we think in California about how we transition to a cleaner and greener economy, that opportunity zones are helping to incentivize that as well. The other things that we do is we also put on various events. We've done events that have ranged from Sacramento to Fresno to Los Angeles and Concord, bringing together speakers to talk about opportunity zones, to talk about specific projects, to try to highlight what's going on in different communities and take this somewhat conceptual policy and turn it into, this is actually what it looks like in our communities, are the actual projects that are moving forward or projects that would move forward if we were to have tax conformance. We also help with local capacity building. We work with local and regional leaders to help build capacity for opportunity zone investment. In some cases, that's actually helping just with matchmaking and networking. In other cases, it's actually doing boot camps or workshops or impact labs where we can bring together different stakeholders in the community to define what is the future we want and how do we ultimately get there together. And then we provide advisory services, which includes from project management and strategic planning to helping think through what are ways to better create a pipeline of projects and create more deal flow within communities. But let's actually talk about what opportunity zones are specifically, which is, and I apologize that this is more of a 101 version for many people who are at a 201 or 301 level, but I just want to sort of create a common framework, which is, opportunity zones were created as a bipartisan effort by Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott, and they became passed as part of federal law in the 2017 tax bill. The goal is to attract private capital to low-income census tracts. That's sort of the high-level concept. Now, what it actually does is it helps provide capital gains tax incentives for long-term investments to be made through qualified funds and into opportunity zone tracts. And what this basically means, and I'll go into the actual structure of the incentive in a minute, but it's about trying to take private capital and turn it into a long horizon capital in communities, particularly underinvested in communities. With that said, you still need to make sure that the projects are going to pencil out for investors. And so the two types of investments that you can ultimately make are property investments and then business investments, qualified opportunity zone businesses and equity within those. I did want to make a note here because often we've heard that opportunity zones and enterprise zones get conflated. We actually have a one-pager on our website that kind of explains the difference between these. They're very different programs, opportunity zones versus enterprise zones. And so I encourage people to take a look at that one-pager if you wanted to see the difference between the two. But what are the benefits for opportunity zone investments? Well, the first part is this temporary deferral of capital gains tax. And what that allows you to do is anyone who makes an investment inside of an opportunity zone through a qualified opportunity fund cannot pay their capital gains tax on that investment until December 31st, 2026. or when they sell the investment, whichever one is sooner. And then what are they able to do? Well, they're able to take a 10%, if they leave the investment in for 5 or more years, you're able to actually not only defer that tax, but also reduce it by 10%. If you leave it in 7 years, you can actually reduce it by 15%. Technically, the deadline for that would have been that you would have had to move money into a zone as of last December 31st. So we're a little bit behind the ball. Some states are ahead of that, but some people who have moved money into Opportunity Zone funds as of this last year can take full advantage of this piece. And then the latter piece is if an investor holds the Opportunity Fund investment over the course of those 10 years, then the investor can permanently avoid capital gain taxes on any of the proceeds made by the investment. So there's sort of 3 major components of this. One is a deferral, one is a reduction in capital gains tax paid on your original capital gains, and then the third part of this is that you don't pay capital gains based off of what is then created in the Opportunity Zone. And so this becomes an attractive instrument to bring private capital into communities that have traditionally been underinvested in. California context setting. So California is uniquely positioned in the Opportunity Zone landscape on several fronts. One of which is we have about 10% of overall Opportunity Zones. We have 879 Opportunity Zones in California out of about 8,700 or so nationally. In those zones, we have 4.2 million Californians, 2.1 million jobs, and 170,000 businesses that currently exist inside those zones. Ideally, through this incentive, we're actually able to create more jobs and create more businesses within those zones. And then in California, we have a disproportionate amount of capital gains available to deploy, particularly because of real estate, tech IPOs, and other forms of capital that's been created within our state for people to, people have a lot of money sitting on the sidelines. And there's been various analysis the Economic Innovation Group have done around this to understand how much money is sitting on the sidelines and how much money the Opportunity Zone benefit might actually mobilize and move into communities. And that's something we're going to continue to track. We're going to continue to track in California, certainly, and hopefully there'll be federal legislation that encourages more of the tracking of this data nationwide. So what is the OZ ecosystem itself? When you think about it just from an investor perspective, you're actually missing a lot of the other parts of the community, which is, yes, there's the investors and funds, and what we've sort of identified here are what are some of the core needs of each of these, but there's the investors and funds, there's the communities themselves, there's the projects or the entrepreneurs, the investment opportunities themselves, there's the public agencies, counties, cities, and state, and then there's the advocates and analysts that need to try to understand what is, what ultimately is going to help create this market and move this market forward. And so I know there's, I don't want to go through each of these individual components, but there's a key need for each of these audiences. And what Cal-OZ tries to do is try to bring together many of those audiences. There's various conferences that may convene only investors and funds, or there's conversations that only happen at the public agency level. But to really make sure that this works and we realize the transformative potential, we need to make sure that all these stakeholders are at the same table describing what do we want in our communities, what will attract private capital, and what ultimately will help us achieve more jobs, more sustainable growth, and actually economic growth within communities. The way to think about this, and this slide I want to credit to our friends at the Milken Institute, which is looking at opportunity zones as an economic development tool. And then what you have is sort of the combination of the public side and the private side coming together with opportunity zones as one of these tools. Infrastructure, housing, jobs, education, health, community finance and tax credits kind of moving in from the public side. Obviously from the private side, there's housing, commercial, retail. There's other funds like opportunity zone funds, CRA, social impact funds, debt and equity, moving into the toolbox, as well as the pipeline. And then that moves into how do we actually create economic development within opportunity zones, creating greater infrastructure, housing, jobs, education, health, etc. And obviously there's other barriers. There's a number of barriers around that, which includes time. And one of the issues around time is that the benefit itself expires at various points. We've already seen one of the components expire as of the end of this last year. Also, what are the state and local regulatory challenges? California has numerous challenges related to development. And so is this an incentive that can help overcome some of those challenges to bring money that wouldn't have otherwise been invested, or other Opportunity Zone funds? And we talked to a number of them that have looked at various things in California and have basically said, but Nevada and Arizona have greater compliance and greater interest in Opportunity Zones at this point. We might just make our investments there. So how do we make ourselves much more, more attractive for those for those investments? This slide, I want to give credit to our friends over at Cosmont, Larry Cosmont, and as it says up top, this actually was created for Riverside County, but it actually seemed very applicable to the conversation you're having, which is how do you think about your actual economic development toolkit and layer OZs on top of TIF districts and zoning? How do you think about tax increment financing as it layers in with opportunity zones? I'll mention more in a second around some of the opportunities, but as you think about what sort of enhanced infrastructure financing districts or CRA funds or other types of districts might the county in partnership with different local governments help create, as well as how do you think about your own land use zoning rules so that you can help expedite a pipeline of partnerships or pipeline of projects that are happening inside of opportunity zones. The other thing I would say is that they're also very compatible to attract other sources of funding. So when you're looking at, by definition, every one of the census tracts that has been declared an opportunity zone may be able to attract other things like new market tax credits or other funding from federal agencies like DOT, EPA, EDA, and other funds. And so in some cases, there's a very complicated capital stack, but the way to think about it is there's a lot of opportunity in opportunity zones. It's just a matter of how you look at the projects and then how you, as a county, kind of step in and help facilitate, help facilitate and support projects that are moving through that pipeline. So my last two slides here are, one is, I'm just going to give a very high level that Peter's going to dive into more around what's going on in terms of California state policy. The current priorities, as we've seen them and heard them and helped advocate for over the course of this last year, is greater transparency and reporting requirements. There was a Senate bill put out around that last year. I know it's going to be a component of a new bill that will be introduced this year. There's also the targeted tax conformity. And the issue with the tax conformity in the states is, as most people know, in California, capital gains are treated as regular income, in which case for high wage earners, you're looking at about 13% is our cap gains tax. And so it's a significant barrier or significant opportunity, depending on how you look at it, in terms of being able to bring some of that money off the sidelines and move it into the community. The idea around these different policies is that we may look at it from project type: housing projects, green projects, ag tech projects, perhaps B Corps or other kind of community-oriented businesses. There's also a geographic focus, Central Valley or ultra-high need communities, as well as the idea of community sponsorship. Communities know what they want best, and so it may not be one of the other project types, but maybe is there a role that we can actually have greater local empowerment for communities to be able to determine what types of projects will help be part of your economic development strategy to bring jobs and sustained and shared prosperity into your community. And the last thing I'd say on here is we've also talked about local capacity building, actually getting resources from the state to help with planning, pre-development, and other types of support to expedite the pipeline of projects that exist within opportunity zones. The other thing I would say, just on the conformity side, is that because of the way that this is done, both in terms of the deferral and reduction, ultimately this is a way that you can take public benefit and leverage that 50-to-1 with private investment that actually ends up moving into a community, because you're recapturing 85 to 90% of that original incentive, 10 years down the road, or I guess in this case, 6.5 years down the road. And so if you're looking at a way to bring private capital off of, and I feel like I may be preaching to the choir here, but it's something that we're continuing to talk with folks in Sacramento about, which is it is a great opportunity for leveraging public investment for up to 50 times private investment. So my last slide is around what are the opportunities for you? What are the opportunities for the county, for local government? One is around awareness building and education. It's from educating various people in your community, from the investor side, from the entrepreneur side, from the policy side, from the city side, that this even exists. Not everybody knows that opportunity zones exist or understand exactly what they can do. Technical assistance, helping to provide training. Now that you may know that it exists, how do you actually build that into a capital stack, build it into a project so you can identify the right type of funding, or even train people in how to create their own qualified opportunity fund, who have capital gains and want to invest in, say, in another business within their own neighborhood. Pipeline development, this is a really big one, is that some communities are doing this well and others are coming a little late to the game, which is how do you identify what are the projects that are happening in opportunity zones, just like our last presenter was describing, and then how do you match make or actually serve as a deal jockey? There's a program that is called Fuse Corps that actually puts full-time fellows into different cities focused on this topic. I know they have one in Fresno, in Riverside, Stockton, and I think there's one other in the Inland Empire, where they're actually helping to be those deal jockeys and help support the pipeline development. From a regulatory perspective, you have some ability to streamline your own approvals process, zoning, other processes, CEQA, kind of thinking through what sort of policies can you put in place to make it a friendly environment where somebody who's coming in and wants to move money, especially because there are time limitations to when the money has to move into a fund, when the fund has to then expend those resources. If something gets stuck into an endless approvals process, they actually will not, they'll fail to meet the obligation or the obligations of the fund, and they won't be able to receive the tax incentive. And so the more that you can de-risk that, the more funders, investors are ready to move that money. As I described a couple slides ago, you could create your own EIFDs or CRIAs for tax increment financing and layer that into the project, which opportunity zones could give you some of that upfront capital from private sources to move it into communities where the EIFDs or CRAs might be able to, ultimately provide some of those resources down the line. And then the OZ prospectus. Many cities and other counties have helped pull these together, which is identifying what does your community want, what are the projects that currently exist within the community, and then advertise those projects. There are some online portals that the state of California has helped put together, as well as another national one. And then there's a broader network of hundreds of opportunity funds that you could help market the opportunities to. And so the advertising from that perspective, and then there's other great examples to build from the Fresno Drive Initiative, and other examples from other cities. Riverside has actually been doing some interesting things, as well as they just had their county come out and recommend support for a state legislative framework that provides tax conformity for opportunity zone incentives, and actually went a little bit further than what was in the bill that was proposed by the governor, or the framework that was proposed by the governor last year, and getting closer to what we're hopeful the legislation will look like this year. So I know that was a lot of information, but I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions before turning it over to my colleague.
Questions? None? Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about opportunity zones, but is it just a designated area within a county that we could apply for as kind of a sub-zoning type of thing going on, or is that how we should approach it?
I probably should have had that so the opportunity zones are individual census tracts that have already been determined. There was a process back in 2017 that was a state-by-state process by which each governor was able to identify 25% of their low-income census tracts and would make those opportunity zones. And so it was vetted by individual states, and then ultimately was accepted by the Treasury. So those are now set. Mm-hmm. And you understand Benito County?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think I can send you guys a link to, but it includes all of our residents, all of the staff. Most of opportunity zone is in your use
interested on the 129 and 101. And as far as, I think he wanted to take advantage of it. And I directed him to the EDC. And hopefully that's where it's needed. And also what I was kind of thinking, it doesn't turn you into Ulster to our landfill zoning, which we're trying to figure out something. We invested a lot of money years ago for some commercial or industrial use on John Smith Road, and it's underutilized, and maybe this might be something that we could kind of designate into getting some more added interest, but it doesn't look like that map extends there. So that helped a lot. I needed to see that map. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think, and what the map really outlines is the geography by which you can take advantage of the tax incentive. And then the project type by which you can take advantage of the tax incentive includes both the acquisition and improvement of property or operating businesses that may exist within those districts. And so in some cases, what you're actually seeing is some operating businesses either expand or move into opportunity zones, which brings jobs into a community that may not have had those jobs previously, and the tax incentive ends up going to the investors in the growth of that particular company, or the redevelopment of particular land. And that's from housing to to manufacturing, other ways that you may want to attract some of that investment. There are, I don't want to get too much into the specific rules here, but there are rules around like what percentage of those, what percentage of the funds have to go into improving the particular land, how much does the land have to get improved by, those types of things. But in most cases, you end up actually working with a CPA to kind of work through those details. But as long as it's something that's either adding jobs, adding facility, or kind of a significant investment within an operating business, those should generally apply as qualify for the tax incentive.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor.
I mean, mine just kind of pertain for planning purposes. I mean, when it comes to the opportunity zone as it applies to each district is obviously going to be different. I believe in my district, it's a lot of residential area, which, and mine's probably the cleanest district, I would say, as far as the highest level of population. But all things considered, I'm just thinking there's all these layers, right? There's ultimately community engagement, right, which is the education for support purposes. And then the other elements, one of the things that I was thinking about is that means that we need to get directly involved into the planning conversation of what the impacts are and getting educated of what the rules would apply to that district to see how we can make it work to really, increase the value of that area. And so I guess it's more of a statement, but I'm just trying to think as a planning part, is there a strong educational piece for us to figure out how the opportunity applies to each district?
Yeah, that's one thing that, and I think the way you describe it is exactly right, is that some zones in more populated areas in, say, the Bay Area or Los Angeles are down to specific neighborhoods. I think what you're describing is sort of like a residential neighborhood, where other ones, it's much larger pieces of land that have traditionally been either agriculture or manufacturing or no development has been on them. I think what a big part of this, and I reference it as an OZ Prospectus down here, there's been some great work that Accelerator for America has done in partnership with Drexel University, developing these for cities and counties around the country, is helping helping each community kind of identify what are the assets that the community is bringing forward, identifying exactly what the map is and what are the different opportunities inside of that map. So in some cases it may be residential, in other cases it may be manufacturing, it may be you want to create a particular, more of a particular region where operating businesses may exist, but you basically can help map that out, identify this is what we want. And then in the prospectus, we've actually seen start to match different project types. So either local entrepreneurs or local businesses saying, yes, I could, that's something I would want to expand to be able to do, or I would want to help develop that particular piece of land. And then you can use the prospectus to attract outside capital. Because there's now hundreds of opportunity funds with billions of dollars of resources within them that are looking for good, high-quality projects. And so it's a way to bring out, bring resources from outside the community. Of course, by developing the prospectus, you also create the opportunity for people within the community to identify that this could actually be a really good investment to keep, especially if they've realized some capital gains recently because of a sale of another of a company or a piece of land, then they can make those reinvestments within the community and get the tax incentive. But to your point, yes, I think the process of actually the community defining exactly within those regions what you're looking for will be really helpful in helping to market to external funders and to invite other people who may want to either develop the land or bring their own operating business into one of those districts.
Thank you. Supervisor Gilliam?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming all the way down and presenting. We really appreciate it. One of the important things is also with opportunity zones that we haven't mentioned here, and I just picked this up off of your website, and I wanted to just point it out. People can maybe read it later. I know that people get very anxious when we say the H word, and H is housing, right? We can't talk about housing because all housing is bad, but we need to have places for people to live. And one of the things you can do with opportunity zones is you can actually work on affordable housing. And Peter, you mentioned in your district that it's very condensed, and that may be an appropriate spot for maybe an opportunity zone for investment in affordable housing. I noticed this article from January 28th talks about Southern California and potentially using some opportunity zones to develop some affordable housing. And with the billions of dollars worth of investment that you said is out there, there is a real opportunity for that. So we ought to pay attention to that, I think. And if one thing I wanted to thank you for, if you go to your CalA's website, I don't know if you're responsible for this or not, but I'll say thank you anyway. San Benito County is the only county listed as a partner on there right now, and I really appreciate that. Right on the home page, you've got our logo on there. So what I really encourage our IT folks to do is take advantage of that. When you click on that, it brings you to our home page and you see our calendar. It'd be great if we could click on that and see what opportunity zone. You see that map right there, and you say, hey, call Harry Mavrogenis 24/7 if you want to invest in our county, or call me, I don't care, put it on there too. But I think that's great, and we need to really be thinking about all the ways to maximize this. And if you have any comments on the affordable housing, I'd like to hear that as well.
Yeah, and I'll leave this to Peter also to describe probably more in a minute. Is affordable housing certainly is one of the larger challenges facing us on a statewide level, and so it's probably one of the depending on exactly how we define affordable housing and exactly what projects would reach the definition that the state would want, I think that's probably the one that we have the greatest likelihood of getting some tax conformance on. Even if tax conformance, the thing I'll say on this is, even if ultimately what's defined to receive state tax conformance has the blend of affordable housing, they'll describe what are sort of the blend of affordable housing that you're looking for. Basically, any housing within an opportunity zone, even if it doesn't meet that standard and doesn't get state tax conformance, would also get the federal benefit. So that's the other thing I would leave you to think about is, regardless of what ends up happening at the state and what the aperture of what the state defines gets tax conformance at the state level, the federal benefit extends to any investment that happens in the community. And so it'll be really important, even if a development may not have as many affordable units as you would want, it may have more workforce housing. That is something that also could benefit.
Yeah, my thought is if somebody was getting that tax break, they'd be more apt to perhaps provide a more affordable product.
Exactly.
So there's profit built into it.
That's exactly, especially in that, and that's a big sort of the carrot and stick of the state, is that the carrot is pretty significant. A 13% capital gains rate is a significant one, both for somebody who's making the initial investment as well as then not having capital gains on the investment that ends up happening within that community. So yeah, I think those are both really good reasons.
Jim Kelly? Jim, you're done?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Supervisor Medina?
Yeah, just real quick. Is this similar or is it the same as an enterprise zone?
It's different from enterprise zone. And we actually have a one-pager up on our website that describes it. This is really looked at as It's a very different program. And so I can circulate that afterwards in terms of the difference between the two.
If we had an enterprise zone or another location had an enterprise zone, can you double dip an opportunity zone and enterprise zone?
There are opportunities for, so I'm not,
We can talk offline, I just wanted to see if that was.
I think it's a case-by-case basis, but what you can do, there is an opportunity to at least stack, if not double dip, at least stack things like new market tax credits and investments from other both federal programs as well as some state programs. And that's where we're seeing some things that just never penciled before start to work because you can stack them together.
Okay, thank you. Good information. Okay, who's next on the list?
So, thank you. Thanks, Dave. The next person that we have on our agenda, Mr. Chair, is Peter Ansel, and he has affiliation with State Senate 12 District. He has experience in applying his private sector work to a public policy role in the California legislature. His policy areas include economic development, technology, agriculture, water, energy, and transportation. So Peter comes with many years of experience and as a senior advisor to Senator Ana Caballero. So we're really excited and glad to have him here to discuss opportunity zones in relations to the state.
Well, thank you for the invitation to come down and talk to San Benito County. It's a lovely drive down. I always forget to book enough time to get down to Pinnacles, but I have to do that in my next trip out. Before I jump into the slide deck, I'll tell you a little bit about the Senator's commitment to opportunity zones. When the program was first announced in 2017 in the Federal Jobs and Tax Cut Act, we were still in the Assembly. We ran a bill, AB 3030, that would have provided an exemption from CEQA for any project that was getting funded inside of an opportunity zone. And that bill moved through a couple policy committees in the Assembly where it then died in appropriations and faced a lot of opposition, even though no Assembly member really knew what an opportunity zone was. We were able to show them all that they had one in their district, except for North San Diego County, which is so wealthy that they don't have any poverty at all, apparently. And so we came back the next year and we ran SB 25 when we reached the Senate. Last year we worked really hard on that bill. It was to create litigation streamlining on a CEQA lawsuit. So instead of the full-blown exemption from doing CEQA, the projects would still have to go through an EIR, meet all of the requirements of CEQA. But if it was sued, it would have been provided some litigation streamlining. That bill was also very hard to move through policy committees. In the Senate EQ committee, we took a fair number of amendments that made the bill look a lot like a statewide program called AB 900 projects, which is something that a lot of billionaire stadium owners that own sports teams were able to get some CEQA litigation streamlining for their projects if they did things like build at LEED Gold standard and made sure that they were committing to do project development to a certain green level. So we said if it's good enough for billionaire stadium owners, it should be good enough for people that are building in opportunity zones. We tried to run that bill through, made it all the way out of the Senate over to the Assembly, where a Assembly committee would not give us a hearing on the bill. So when we think about how hard it is to move legislation that tries to create economic pathways to improve the quality of life for the people that live in these 879 census tracts, it's been very difficult to do for our office. There are bills last year that were run by the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Hertzberg. His bill didn't make it out of the Senate. So this is proving to be challenging. I'm going to skip over some of these bills that died last year. And we'll talk about right here, because this is really where we're starting this year, is with what happened at the end of last session. So at the end of last session, the governor started leaning into opportunity zones, and he put forward budget trailer language, so avoiding the legislative policy process, putting language directly into the budget that would have created state tax conformity that Dave's been talking about, that 13%. We're one of only 4 states that does not have state tax conformity. Massachusetts, Alabama, and Mississippi are the other 3. And so the Department of Finance spent a long time meeting with a variety of different stakeholders in the Assembly and the Senate, with labor, with business groups, to try to put language together that the governor felt met what the state cares about in terms of reaching our climate change goals and building affordable housing. The language was never introduced because we could not get the Assembly to come to an agreement that this would move, and of course it was part of budget language, so the budget overall had to move. So the language came out. We fought hard in our office to include some language specifically to agriculture technology. We've seen places like Salinas and Fresno and Merced start to actually get startup companies come into those communities, bring jobs, bring entrepreneurs. And so we felt it was really important that that be expanded on, and that you can do that in a way where venture capitalists will look to rural communities as a place where they can start businesses. We think ag tech is a great way to do that. We think the Assembly didn't move for a couple of reasons. One, there was a real lack of vision and leadership over there behind the program and supporting the program. So there was no real Assembly member that was going to take up the mantle, take the baton, and fight for the programs. But also the California Labor Council sent out a letter close to the end of the session in strong opposition. And their opposition comes from the fact that over the course of time, the Department of Finance would cap how much capital gains could be impacted in the general fund through doing state tax conformity. And that cap was going to be $5 billion over the life cycle of the Opportunity Zone program. Well, the California Labor Council has concerns about unfunded pensions, and so they oppose that because they oppose anything that has that much of a direct impact to the general fund without a pathway back. And we are hopeful that there's some things happening inside the Capitol and around the Capitol this year that will change that part of the conversation. And the most important one is there are going to be bills that are going to still be out there on opportunity zones. We've been working with California OZ and California Forward on what Senator Caballero's effort's going to be. The third time is going to be the charm for us. But the state treasurer has also launched an ad hoc committee focused on economic development, affordable housing, and opportunity zones. So Fiona Ma's office has a deputy secretary tasked with working with about 30 to 40 leaders across the state, and they're going into the bottom 10 to 20% of the census tracts, so the ones that are the poorest of the poor based on adjusted median income. And they're putting professionals to help those communities create prospectuses and seek deals and do matchmaking. So I don't know exactly where the San Benito zone ranks on the list, but regardless, you should have a conversation with the Treasurer's office and with it's Jovan Agee is the Deputy Secretary that's running the effort. There is, the more that they hear from local governments that there's a need for help, the more it's going to empower them to come into the building when we're running legislation and say that this is something that the Treasurer's office wants. And that's important because she's not going to just look at that $5 billion cost of the general fund over the life of the program. She's going to look at the return on investment. So she's going to start to figure out for each dollar that comes into these communities, how many jobs are going to be created, what new property tax roll and employment taxes those communities are going to see. And we think that that data is going to be helpful to hopefully change some of the narrative that you face in the Assembly that this is just a gentrification program on the communities and that this is just a boondoggle for rich investors to get richer by avoiding taxes, which is basically the narrative that we're facing. So California is seeing opportunity zone deals, and the money is flowing to places where money flows. So Los Angeles, San Francisco, big cities are seeing primarily housing-based deals, not only affordable housing, but they're seeing they're seeing money come in. At the federal level, there's some concern about the program, and it's again that same narrative of this is gentrification and this is just a cash opportunity for rich people to avoid taxes and get richer. And so we saw legislation move at the end of last year that U.S. Senator Ron Wyden sponsored, where he's trying to put some guardrails on the program. And we looked through that, and we're trying to pick the best pieces of that and put a little bit of a California flavor on it so that we can, again, work on what we're hearing from the opponents of the program and their concerns about gentrification. So this is sort of what a high-level view of the legislation is that we're working on. The bill's probably going to be, a monster of 80-something pages, but and a lot of that's the tax code conformity stuff that we have to do. But first and foremost, it's transparency and reporting. So the funds that get created and get approved to do business and get and invest inside of our state would need to be doing some reporting back to the FTB. They would be reporting on things like if they're doing an affordable housing project, how many units are actually being created. If they are investing in a business, the number of jobs that are being created, the average wage. And then the FTB would post that information online. For affordable housing projects, we'll have the language tied to qualified low-income housing definitions. Developers will need to have an agreement with the tax allocation committee, but this is a way that these developers can start to make some projects pencil where maybe just one of the benefits on their own didn't get them there, but now they can also go get a qualified opportunity zone fund to be an investor in their housing project. And because of what that investor is going to be able to see in their rate of return, and then being able to double dip into some of our tax credits and matching with federal tax credits, all of a sudden the project starts to work. Clean energy projects are something that the governor did have in his trailer bill language at the end of last year. And this, obviously goes to our climate goals. We made sure that there is language included for storage, not just battery lithium ion, but a range of different storage technologies. The state, if you follow the energy market, what's going on at the state and grid reliability, we all hear about the duck curve and the fact that we have a lot of renewables being generated, but when the sun goes down or the wind stops blowing, we oftentimes find ourselves close to having to make decisions about what we're doing with the grid and or we're bringing back up other dirtier energy sources. So storage, we think, is the next big area of energy that needs investment so that those renewables can be held overnight. And with storage projects being included in opportunity zone geographic areas, hopefully it means that if somebody's looking at some solar generation, they can add solar onto it. We'll do something that's focused in on highest needs. Most likely we'll take off the best performing census tracts. So again, getting to those places that don't need the dollars because they're already seeing investments come in. If you are one of California's 879 census tracts and your median AMI is over 120%, then we would be making a recommendation that you don't need to carry as much as other tracts in our state. You maybe should have been considered to be a different track should be considered in the first place. And this is happening at the federal level where we're seeing the original author of the bill, Tim Scott, considering legislation to allow states to start swapping zones. And in light of what Dave mentioned about the time frame to get this done, we think that's dangerous for people to start to do, that having projects that are shovel ready that you can start marketing to investors is a lot more important than going back and starting at the first square of this and picking just the geographic areas all over again. A way to do community-driven projects is, I think Dave's mentioned already, layering EIFDs, CREAs with your opportunity zones will include disadvantaged communities. So if the tracks are part of a AB 1550 already identified disadvantaged community, we would be suggesting in our legislation that that's an area that receives our state tax capital gain conformity. And then I did not mention ag tech in that list, but ag tech will be in there too. What's also not mentioned is sin businesses. So one of the ways we're trying to put some guardrails on this is by saying what you can't do inside of our zones. And that would be things like gambling establishments, liquor stores, private jet hangars, basically things that you would consider to be inappropriate for a community that's trying to rise up and probably doesn't have a lot of its community with access to private jets, or may already have an abundance of liquor stores, unfortunately. We want to put some boundaries on the type of things that aren't appropriate to be going into the zones. So we'll be seeking in the bill funding to help with the technical assistance, the package building that you guys have been asking about so much. We think that that's an important part, particularly for our rural communities and the places that aren't Los Angeles and San Francisco, where they don't have large staff and aren't having investors come to them because they're fortunate enough to have deal flow anyway. So this list of supporters is just a quick, short list, actually, of the supporters that that came out in informal support on 3 different Senate bills relating to opportunity zones last year. And you can see it's a nice cross-section of different types of support. It's, you can see from Merced and from Tulare that we had some of the ones related to our bill. Los Angeles Biz Fed was one of our supporters. But it doesn't have the state level organization, so there's no RCRC, there's no CSAC. There isn't every single county in our Senate district. There isn't every single county in the districts of the other senators that ran this legislation. There's no cities. There aren't resolutions coming out of local government saying we need state tax conformity going to the leaders of the Assembly and the Senate and the governor's office. And we don't see the economic justice people on this list at all. And so there's a huge opportunity still just to do alliance creation and to get these bills moved. But it's got to start right here in this room. You control your own destiny to the extent that, you can get CSAC to come on as a supporter at the statewide level. It matters. That if we have to go to a local government committee when the bill gets referred or GovOps, they'll ask us why CSAC isn't on here. To the extent that you can get other rural counties to come on and support legislation, it matters because if it shares from, let's say, Senator McGuire, who represents Santa Rosa, I know the city of Santa Rosa is working on their opportunity zones, and I know Senator McGuire is not a fan. And so we may have a challenge just to get through our first policy committee in the Senate with this bill. And the louder that you guys are to his staff and to the people that you belong to as statewide organizations, it's going to help us be able to move bills. And so I'm happy to field questions about what we're working on. Hopefully that gives you an idea that we're not done fighting for opportunity zones and that we're trying to create something that gets us through the opposition that we've seen so far in the legislature the past 2 years, but that also would be meaningful, especially for our rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gilliam?
I'm good, thank you.
Supervisor Medina? Supervisor Vitale?
Yeah, Peter, I want you to convey our thanks to the Senator for all of her work on this issue. And, I think she has a pretty good, clear understanding what San Bernardino County is really up against. And what we're seeing is a lot of pressure from the state, and I think a lot of counties are facing this, to build more houses, solve the housing crisis. We see a discrepancy in the costs of housing if you live here, but try to get a job here to afford that mortgage payment. I don't know how people do it. As far as I'm concerned, if, a house here would be an average house would be a low-income house in just 50 miles from here. And, you know, this whole thing has me, as one supervisor, I'm sure my colleagues feel kind of frustrated as well, is that we're approaching this upside down. And a community like this should have a little bit more help bringing businesses here. And we're struggling with that. We have some real fine opportunities out there, as you saw in a presentation a little earlier. And really, as I said, it's really the first time we've had these type of opportunities since I've been on the board. And I'm hopeful that we're able to nail one or two of them in. But, you know, the real jobs, why these people are on Highway 25 going on that road every single day, and it's only going to get worse, and on this highway out here on 156, they're going to other communities where the jobs are. And we need help to have those companies be a little bit more interested in placing their businesses here. And, you know, we have a measure on the ballot that you probably heard, Measure K, no on K, yes on K. You've seen the signs driving in. And, you know, it just stems down to, you know, a frustration from the whole community that we don't have the jobs here. Everybody's driving an hour each way every day. And small rural counties shouldn't be forced to build the housing for job creation away from here. And there should be more of a penalty in those urban areas. And that list there had the big cities. What chance do we have to have the opportunity zones here and make it attractive enough where someone would take us serious?
Well, Supervisor, I appreciate the comment. It sounds like I'm sitting with Senator Javier having the same conversation, because she talks a lot about, you know, these challenges for our rural communities. She keynoted at Habitat for Humanity a couple of weeks ago, and she spent a half an hour talking to them about how hard it is in her district where, you know, where she essentially sees commuters coming in from Silicon Valley and job centers into rural parts of the state, driving down the cost of rent and the cost of home ownership. To the extent that locals can't afford to be in, she knows people so this are being, you know, pushed down in the case that they can far in the South Kansas. She sees it happen. That's why she was a supporter of SB 50, which was a bill that didn't make it out of the Senate. Senator Weiner ran that bill. It had mixed support at local government level. There are some local governments, a lot of the ones in the Bay Area that haven't been meeting their housing obligations, opposed the bill. And frankly, it was the LA delegation in the Senate that didn't support the bill that ended that bill for this year. Senator Weiner said he's going to bring something back, and I expect Senator Caballero will be a co-author again, because she knows that the impact from the job centers not meeting their housing numbers and their housing goals, what that's doing to rural communities. I think that there are good things happening in rural parts of the state. So we've seen the governor take a real interest in the Central Valley, whether it's been the commitment to maintain, you know, some version of high-speed rail there, to his veto of SB 1 and his commitment to the voluntary settlement agreement so that we don't end up with this water litigation. He's trying to have some balance, because we think that he's mindful of the fact that the people are going to have to live someplace, and Fresno's likely going to be a, you know, a next economic hub for the state. And that's creating, you know, new things around Fresno. So in his budget is a Fresno Merced innovation corridor around ag tech. Salinas has already been working for a few years on ag tech innovation with Hartnell College and Forbes
the Forbes conference. I know that California Forward and those folks are going to be coming in and putting a drive effort together for the Salinas Valley region, much like they did in Fresno. And I'd encourage you for you to participate, because that exposure is helping get some attention down in that part of the state. The San Joaquin Valley is starting to be not as forgotten. I think that a lot of that is, a lot of being heard is being persistent and being loud. And so, you do have someone in the Senate that has pathways to leadership into the governor's office, and we hope that that matters for the rural communities when we try to work on these hard bills. But we do need help in having the places like LA see what the impact is to your communities.
Funny, because as I was thinking about it even before, all I kept considering is to a certain extent this non-momentum with the state is creating a problem by itself. You mentioned the assemblies are basically the ones that are stalling moving an opportunity zone bill. And the reality is I mean, I just don't understand that logic with the whole issue of gentrification. I mean, it's already happening. We are having folks moving into our community, and by default, increased cost and housing, and by default, families are leaving our communities, and then now the landscape of our communities changed so drastically. So my point is I feel like the opportunity zone is a value to be able to have someone who has money, who has capital, to invest in our community and invest in low-income housing that would actually be, in that sense, a solution for our housing issues.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it is risk capital. These are projects that, there's no guarantee they're going to make money for the investors or if they're investing in a company. There's no guarantee that the equity is going to ever turn into something liquid. We don't understand why there's such pushback to people making risk capital available to communities that have had historically different access to any form of capital. And so that's, some of the frustration certainly that we feel in our office.
Yeah, well, and ultimately, my final statement is that there's a lot of, in that sense, as far as development, there's a big divide in our community, and it's only getting worse. Measure K, as Supervisor Tello mentioned, is one key element of it. And I'm looking at the map, the opportunity zone map on your website. It highlights 101, which is the corridor in and of itself, that for these nodes, the existing nodes, as opportunities for our community, for business development, for employment, a lot, sales tax. There's all these good things that could be happening, and ultimately, there's a big divide because of the housing element. So we just need to a certain extent, I feel like if you can express to the senator not only my thanks, but ultimately, if we had more local control, and if there was a focus a little bit on planning, where we, these opportunity zones became a big part of our planning process, then it might create a good dialogue to say we're ready to solve our own problems, and with the senator's help, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Hernandez. Well, thank you for your presentation. Very educational. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
No. All right, next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and go back to item number 4, Economic Development Corporation. This will be presented to us by Aaron Johnson, Chairman of the Economic Development Corporation of San Benito County. Aaron is Vice President of Safety at Granite Rock. He oversees Environmental and Quality Division, and he has over 20 years experience there. So what we've done is just asked him to give us a quick update, a brief update on how the Economic Development Corporation is doing and where they're at with things, as well as leveraging opportunities. Aaron?
Thank you, Ray. And I'd also like to thank the Senator's office, too, from the business community, to have that kind of support and that forward thinking about the importance of economic development and leveraging these opportunity zones is just excellent. Opportunity zones, they're complex, but it's really about getting capital to areas that need it the most. capital to areas that need it the most, and not incentivizing tax breaks to places like Silicon Valley that already have the money. So it's just really good to see this board's support for that, and to hear the senators fighting hard in Sacramento, which I know is very difficult at times. So thank you for that. I also want to thank, before I get started here, I want to thank staff. The staff at the county have been very supportive of EDC efforts, from Ray down to below, and Dulce, who's in the back of the room, and Edgar, who was here earlier. Harry is just what you want to see from an economic development perspective, is what you want to see. We don't have everything ironed out yet on our permitting, but we have that as the North Star, and so that's just excellent. So a little bit about what we've done in the last time since you've probably heard from me. Some of you know more, so if I'm telling you what you already know, I apologize in advance. But when you gave us the seed money last year, we went out and hired Randy Starbuck. He started a business business retention and surveying campaign, and we supplemented that program too with Kathy Johnston, which everybody knows here. Through that process, we did about 2 to 3 dozen visits, and I've advised the board that economic development is a long-term investment. You don't expect to see big wins right away, but we've had some pleasant surprises, and we're actually in some advanced talks with some 3 manufacturing firms that are looking to come to our county. And I'll come back to some of the businesses that you guys have approved and attracted, and why we're on the right track there in a second. We've learned that some of our local businesses like Technova, Fireclay, and others are anxious to invest and grow their businesses in the county, and sometimes the opportunity zone is not right for them because of where their financing is coming from, but they're still a good fit for our county. I would say that you've heard a lot of this ag tourism today, and I would encourage you guys, don't undervalue the ag tourism potential in this county. We have a lot of resources for that, and you'll hear some more partnerships that we'll have with the Chamber, HDA, San Juan Committee going forward to get more of that business and to get our people in this county aware of those opportunities, because there is a lot of great places to live, work, and play here in the county itself. So some of you know, we started down the process of hiring a long-term chair for the economic development. We've had several rounds of screening efforts. Let me tell you a little bit about that process and where it didn't go right and where we think it's going to go right here soon. We conducted an outside firm. We went through 20, 30 different candidates. We shortened that list down to about 4 or 5 different candidates. Some of those candidates were actually from our community, young, very capable people, but we wanted, because we're in startup mode, we wanted to have somebody with a little bit more experience. We got that list down to 2, and then at the last minute, someone had to pull out because of some life issues. They couldn't agree to a full-time position, but we had an excellent interview with about 18 to 20 people from the county. It was hard to keep, that sounds like a big group, but it's actually hard to keep the group that small because so many in our county like economic development are interested in that process. But we were able to get that down to a smaller group. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that candidate didn't work out. So the whole committee unanimously thought that person had the right skills, but it turned out there was a counteroffer and some other concerns that we had. So we said, this county deserves more. We're going to start the process over. We're going to start the process over. And so that's exactly what we did. In that process, when we did our first screening and the boards got the list down to a smaller process, we actually utilized another tool that's kind of interesting, where we did a personality profile of what an economic director needs to have. And they went out, and the final candidates took a couple-hour test. This thing's pretty amazing. They had to do math and algebra and all that kind of stuff. And what it did, it allowed us to target the questions that we need to make sure they're a right match to our community. I'm happy to say that the candidate that had to drop out because he couldn't do the full-time commitment, I was able to re-meet with him and talk about his research that he wanted to share with us on the community just for free. And I was able to talk to him a little bit and say, well, you know, if you can't commit to full-time because of life issues right now, what about a hybrid approach of doing part-time and then partnering with our resource we already have right now, which is Kathy Johnson, who has a lot of community touches. And so he thought about it a little bit while we went back and forth on a work agreement, and we're at the final, and the board has tentatively approved the work agreement and met this individual. And so we're in the final stages of getting this person back. So this is really exciting because we used all the information we learned on that interview team, and thank you, Supervisor Gilio, for participating in that process, and Ray and Harry and other people in the room who also participated in that process. That was, if I ever went through that hiring process, I'm not sure I'd have a job, because that was intense, but it's what the county deserves. So hopefully by March 1st, we will have this guy seated, and then we'll be able to take our focus towards business attraction and start leveraging the good stuff that we have in this county going forward. I mentioned that some of our partnering efforts, but I want to, we also recently had a national site selector come to our community and tell us the good, bad, and ugly of our community. There was a lot of goods about our community, and I would say that this board and the leadership on this board is one of the strengths of the community. Your united front about approving good projects for the community and doing good planning is going to separate us from other communities up and down the state. And that is a real opportunity that you guys should all be very proud of. I know we're kind of stumbling on Measure K right now, but going forward, getting the right zoning and having that pre-zone so that people have more certainty in the permitting process, that's going to make us a destination. That's going to make us a destination. And I'm very excited about that going forward and working with Harry. I wanted to tell you that some of the ag tech business that's coming in here and some of the hemp manufacturing, there's some interesting opportunities that have popped up in there that have kind of undone have confronted our liabilities in an interesting way. We have a PG&E incentive for energy for the first couple years when you move a business here, but if you were to look at it from a site selector long-term, your costs are higher long-term. Some of these vertically integrated hemp producers, for seed to processing to growing to the full thing, some of them are bringing in solar and energy storage. These projects, these types of projects, if we learn how to permit these and expand these in the county, we can actually incentivize people coming in for that energy sector. So that's something to watch out for when you guys look at new projects coming forward there too. I wanted to say that the strategic zoning is paramount going forward, and making sure that we get that right in those zones. And Supervisor Hernandez, you're right that the opportunity zone looks more business focused, but there is opportunity to improve your residences in your community. When you put that capital in there, they have to improve those residences. So there's still growth there. I think those were the highlights I wanted to give. But I'll open it for questions too, because you guys are usually very thoughtful.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, questions, Supervisor Hernandez?
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Vitello?
Yeah, you hit something as far as being a kind of a destination. I caught a little bit of enthusiasm that at the moment I don't have a whole lot of with Measure K, but as far as a destination for businesses and having the zoning and the certainty in place, do we have that zoning and certainty in place anywhere in the unincorporated areas?
To be frank, we could do better, but I think we have the willpower and the political interest to identify those and make those better. So there's more execution on the general plan. There's a lot of good zoning contemplated in the general plan, but we got to follow up with some ordinances and advance those.
Our general plan, the 2015 general plan was a very well put together, and a lot of people contributed to it over a lot of meetings and time, and we do need to incorporate some of that zoning, and I look forward to, the new director starting in March, helping us accomplish that, working with our RMA department.
Me too.
That concludes your,
Yeah.
thank you. Supervisor Medina? Supervisor Gilroy?
Yeah, just a quick point. So the city of Gilroy is hiring for a it's called the Assistant City Manager in charge of economic development. And do you know what their top pay is by any chance? I'll tell you, it's $226,000. So don't feel discouraged that it's hard to recruit here in San Benito County. We have that problem kind of across all of our departments. And I really like the fact that you guys are thinking out of the box to try to bring somebody in qualified, even if it's only to get us going, because we need to get going. So I really appreciate your hard work on that. And you know, I hate to even say this because it's redundant. We've been talking about it all afternoon. Economic development is what is going to allow us to have the funds to pay the folks that we bring in. So we're kind of in like a catch-22 or a circular argument, but we really need to get some wins here, get some jobs, and increase our revenue for the county, sales tax base, all these different things, and it's going to help us out so much. So I really appreciate your efforts, and I know you have an important job and you work for a really big company, so thank you for the time that you dedicate to the county. Not to mention, you guys aren't paid for this, so I really appreciate, I really appreciate this and your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you, Aaron, for making a presentation, giving us an update. I feel, in fact, I know that the board has confidence in your group to move forward. We proved it by the 5-year investment that we did, and we want to continue to work on that relationship, because at the end of the day, we all have one boss, and that's the public. We want to make sure that we provide the best services available. So thank you on behalf of the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any final thoughts, comments from the public?
I just
None?
had a thought.
Hold on.
Hey.
Go ahead.
So with what you were mentioning, Aaron, and actually kind of piggybacking off what Supervisor Patel was mentioning is kind of that public discourse about the value. And I've said it before, so I'm probably being redundant, but maybe in the element of when it comes down to what we need for the sake of our infrastructure, economic development, like Supervisor Gill mentioned. I don't know if that's an opportunity to do a public forum or something to that extent, because right now there's a lot of emotion out there. I think it'd be a good opportunity to bring that emotion to a healthy conversation about what the needs are, and maybe even for the sake of our information from the public side of where they're at and why they're there. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations, but you know, it would be good for us as a board to hear that from the public.
That's an excellent observation, Supervisor. That just made me realize I forgot a whole bullet point in my presentation about our education and outreach efforts. Our webpage is up and going, and we need to tell our good story more. And that means everybody in the community has to be able to tell that good story more. So we'll be working on one-pagers that we can give supervisors, so when we bring in new businesses, they can tour and they can help tell our good story. And it also means we got to educate ourselves about what our strengths are. We had our board, EDC board, go to our wonderful high school and saw what they did with that bond funding. And the workforce that we're generating in our community is really impressive. You don't see these trade skill workforce development in all communities. And businesses that want to come and have a skilled workforce would love to know about that. But it's a matter of us educating people and educating on policy matters that are against our interests. We did a fact sheet on this Measure K. We can't take a political side, one view or the other, but we did a fact sheet, and I think going forward we can partner better with the supervisors to help get the right information to the public so that they can make good decisions.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Okay, wrap it up, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to state that staff has really listened to the board as well as to the speakers and taken some notes concerning the directive concerning ozone as well as economic development. As I mentioned before, we had tied that in with the strategic plan and really kind of moving that forward, and that's why we're here mainly today this afternoon. I want to give special thanks to all the speakers. A lot of preparation, a lot of work went into this. Also the setup as well, technology, and wanted to thank the department heads as well as the board for your attendance today and your input. And with that, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to hand it back to you.
Again, thank you for being here with us and having lunch and hearing us speak all the time. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? There's been second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Against, motion carries. Thank you.